Chapter 2476. The Ninth Divine Lord's large hand pressed down, sealing off the space around them. Lin Tian's heart skipped a beat, and he was once again shocked by this person's aura. He was really too strong, far beyond what the 10th Divine Lord could compare to. However, although he could feel the strength of his opponent, there was not a trace of fear on his face. His reincarnation, I could see everything clearly, including the pure movement of the body and the intertwining trajectory of the saint power. He simply turned his body sideways and dodged again. At the same time, with a clang, he waved the sword of heaven and earth in his hand. The sword's momentum surged violently as it slashed toward the Ninth Divine Lord's forehead. The Ninth Divine Lord's eyes narrowed slightly. Not bad. Although Lin Tian's cultivation was only at the 9th dimensional realm, he was surprised that Lin Tian was able to dodge his attacks twice. Immediately, in the next moment, the aura that he exuded became even stronger. He was no longer purely attacking with his body. His remarkable art was activated at this time, and it turned into a light net that suppressed and sealed everything. It pressed down on Lin Tian. Wherever the light net passed, even the air was suppressed inside, and it was difficult to escape. Lin Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He could naturally feel the terror of this light net. His reincarnation eye moved slightly, and the reincarnation light that filled the sky surged out mightily, turning into a reincarnation river that drowned the light net. At the same time, it pressed down on the Ninth Divine Lord. The two collided, and for a moment, there was a sizzling sound as the light drowned out the surroundings. Almost in the next moment, the Ninth Divine Lord passed through the hazy light without a sound and appeared in front of Lin Tian in the blink of an eye. His speed was so fast that it was frightening. He once again raised his hand to grab Lin Tian, and together with the dense divine inscriptions pressed down. This attack was so fast that Lin Tian's expression changed. Even with his reincarnation eye, it was difficult for him to see the opponent's attack trajectory clearly. However, he didn't panic at all. His eye of destiny trembled slightly as he unleashed his teleportation ability. He instantly appeared behind his opponent, and slashed his sword towards his opponent's head. The Ninth Divine Lord's eyes moved slightly. He had used a special body movement, and a special palm technique in his attack. Originally, Lin Tian could not see the trajectory even with his Rinnegan. After all, his cultivation was a little low. He thought that he would be able to suppress Lin Tian directly. However, he did not expect that Lin Tian would still be able to avoid the attack and launch a counterattack. Teleportation? The ability of your left eye. As the ninth strongest person under the ancestral gods of the divine spirit lineage, the Ninth Divine Lord's eyesight was naturally not bad. In an instant, he saw how Lin Tian had been able to dodge his attack. It was the special ability of Lin Tian's left eye. Not bad. The person's voice was cold. The light of the sacrificial god's spirit shook off Lin Tian's sword of heaven and earth, and then pressed down on Lin Tian again. Lin Tian was fearless. His left eye of destiny continuously used teleportation, while his right Rinnegan eye mobilized the light of reincarnation. Together with the sword of heaven and earth in his hand, he condensed the 10th dimensional law of heaven sealing. He clashed with the Ninth Divine Lord again and again without falling behind. Of course, he did not have the slightest advantage. You're just a mortal of the 9th dimensional realm, but you. The 8th Divine Lord and the 7th Divine Lord were working together to cast a technique to restrain the 9th dimensional ancestral vein. Seeing this scene, their eyes narrowed slightly. Roar! A dragon's roar shook the sky. The 9th dimensional ancestral vein was completely formed by the condensation of boundless saint spiritual chi. It seemed to have a consciousness. At this moment, it roared and the ancestral vein dragon body shook violently as if it was resisting the 8th Divine Lord and the 7th Divine Lord. The 8th Divine Lord and the 7th Divine Lord's eyes were cold. The 8th Divine Lord frowned. It's indeed a little difficult for two people. Use your heart, the 7th Divine Lord said coldly. The 8th Divine Lord nodded. The aura outside his body suddenly strengthened a lot as he used all his strength to suppress the 9th dimensional ancestral vein. The goddess and the saintesses of all heavens tilted their heads and looked at the 8th Divine Lord and the 7th Divine Lord. They looked at each other and moved respectively. The 9th Heaven's Divine Thunder Law and the 9th Heaven's Sacred Wind Law surged together, forming a storm of wind and thunder that attacked the two of them. The 9th dimensional ancestral vein was illusory and was usually difficult to find. It was definitely not a good thing for this vein to find the 9th dimensional ancestral vein. Rumble! The void rumbled as the storm of wind and thunder arrived in front of the 8th Divine Lord and the 7th Divine Lord in the blink of an eye. However, in the next moment, with a whoosh, the storm of wind and thunder was instantly shattered. With just the two of you, even if we stand still, you won't be able to hurt us at all, the 8th Divine Lord said coldly. This caused the goddess and the saintesses of all heavens to turn serious. These two people were indeed too strong. The 9th Heaven's Divine Thunder Law and the 9th Heaven's Sacred Wind Law were their strongest techniques, but they couldn't even withstand the aura of these two people. Lin Tian was fighting with the 9th Divine Lord and naturally saw this scene. His eyes flickered slightly as he slashed at the 8th Divine Lord and the 7th Divine Lord. The sword light was mixed with the power of the 3 dimensions of heaven and earth, the power of the heaven sealing law, and the power of the origin of samsara. Clang! The sword light was ear-piercing and landed in front of the 8th Divine Lord and the 7th Divine Lord in the blink of an eye. Rumble! With a loud rumble, the 8th Divine Lord and the 7th Divine Lord were surrounded by divine light and shattered his sword light. This caused him to be slightly shocked. His sword strike was definitely more than 10 times stronger than the attacks of the goddess and the saintesses of all heavens, but it was still easily shattered by these two people. The two of them were much stronger than the 9th Divine Lord. If these two people were to fight, even with Wu Yi's help, the current him would definitely not be able to withstand them. The 9th Divine Lord snorted coldly and stepped forward. In a flash, he was in front of Lin Tian and once again pressed down with his palm. This time, 5-colored divine light intertwined in the center of his palm, bringing with it an extremely sharp aura and vigorous nomological fluctuations. Lin Tian used the heaven sealing law to meet it head-on. With a whoosh, the heaven sealing law was shattered. This is a new 10th dimension law? The goddess and the saintesses of all heavens were shocked as they saw this. Lin Tian's eyes flickered as he saw this. This person was very strong. After activating the law of the 10th dimension, his battle prowess was clearly stronger than his current battle prowess. Lin Tian's law of sealing the heavens was completely unable to block this attack. As a mortal from the lower realms, you are really not bad. However, I don't have much time to waste with you now, the 9th Divine Lord said coldly. With a boom, the 10th dimension law in the center of his palm became even sharper, as if it could cut through everything in the world. Moreover, it was not only the center of his palm. The 10th dimension law also intertwined around his palm. Lin Tian glanced at the 8th Divine Lord and the 7th Divine Lord, who were restraining the 9th Divine Lord. His gaze then fell on the 9th Divine Lord again. Light intertwined in his eyes as he used the light of samsara to meet his opponent's 10th dimension law. At the same time, he began to comprehend and analyze this 10th dimension law. Boom! 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 In the blink of an eye, 4 hours had passed in the intense battle. During these 4 hours, he was somewhat at a disadvantage in his battle with the 9th Divine Lord. Then, after 4 hours, the same 5-colored divine light gradually intertwined around his body and slashed toward his opponent. 10th dimension, cutting Tao, cutting through everything in the world, he muttered to himself. As his voice rang out, the 5-colored divine light around his body became even denser in the blink of an eye, and the nomological fluctuations became even stronger. He controlled it again! The saintesses and goddesses were shocked. At this time, Lin Tian had clearly mastered the 10th dimension law that the 9th Divine Lord had used. In the blink of an eye, he had become proficient in it. Little Tianyin looked at Lin Tian, her hands clasped together. Her big sapphire-like eyes were filled with a strange light. The melodious sound of the flute floated in this space. Wu Yi played the reincarnation tribulation song. It was as peaceful as ever. The 8th Divine Lord and the 7th Divine Lord both froze in shock. The 9th Divine Lord's face turned cold. You actually. The 9th Divine Lord looked at Lin Tian. At this time, there was shock in his eyes, as well as an extremely heavy murderous intent. His Tao-severing law was actually learned by a mortal from the lower realms within 4 hours. This was unbearable for him. Boom! Outside his body, the cutting Tao law boiled and turned into a sea of cutting Tao law. It annihilated everything and mercilessly pressed toward Lin Tian. Lin Tian's eyes were deep. The 10th dimension law of the cutting Tao law that he had just mastered also boiled and faced the other party. Similar laws collided in the blink of an eye, erupting into a destructive light that filled the sky. A fierce aura surged in this place. It was extremely terrifying. In the end, the two similar laws collided and collapsed at the same time, leaving behind a destructive rainbow light that filled the sky. The 9th Divine Lord's gaze turned even colder. The aura outside his body began to rise again. For a full 4 hours, not only did he not suppress Lin Tian, who was in the 9th dimension, but he also let the other party learn the cutting Tao law. Although Lin Tian was not as proficient in controlling it as he was, it still made him feel extremely uncomfortable and cold. I won't kill you for now. However, I will bestow upon you the punishment of a god, he said coldly. As his words fell, a holy blade of light appeared behind him. Extremely fierce law fluctuations intertwined. Obviously, that was the peak power of the cutting Tao law. When such an aura appeared, the boundless space in this place trembled, causing the goddesses and the others' expressions to change. This aura was too terrifying. It was much more powerful than before. The group could not help but look at Lin Tian. At this moment, all of them became worried. Only Wui remained calm and unperturbed. The reincarnation tribulation crossing song was even more melodious. At the same time, Lin Tian said coldly, "The punishment of a god? Leave it to yourself." As his words fell, his right leg, which was stepping on the ground, shook violently. Suddenly, endless dragon patterns intertwined. Roar! The 9th dimension ancestral vein shook violently and let out the loudest dragon roar. Boundless 9th dimension ancestral vein Holy Spirit power rushed out from the ground and turned into a divine dragon that looked down on the world behind him. The 9th Divine Lord's body trembled slightly. His gaze fell on the divine dragon behind Lin Tian, and he was immediately moved. The divine dragon exuded an aura that was too frightening. At this moment, he could not help but feel a chill run down his soul. At the same time, the 8th Divine Lord and the 7th Divine Lord were also moved. Not only were they shocked by the divine dragon that rushed out behind Lin Tian, but also because at this moment, their suppression of the 9th dimension ancestral vein began to be greatly affected. A special force suddenly emerged from the ancestral vein and constantly disturbed them. What have you done? Chapter 2477. The majestic dragon circled behind Lin Tian. Its body was at least 10,000 feet long and exuded a majestic aura. Not only did such a scene cause the 9th, 8th, and 7th Divine Lord's expressions to change, even the goddess and the others could not help but feel shocked. Little 4's dragon burial scripture. The saint's eyes flickered. I almost forgot that the 9-dimensional ancestral vein is here. Little 10, who has cultivated the dragon burial scripture, can mobilize the power of the 9-dimensional ancestral vein here to fight. Roar! The dragon's roar shook the heavens and reverberated through all directions. The raging pressure rolled and created waves of terrifying saint energy that resembled water ripples in this place. Lin Tian's eyes were indifferent as he looked at the 9th Divine Lord. With a slight thought, the divine dragon behind him suddenly swooped down. In the past 4 hours, while he was fighting with the 9th Divine Lord and analyzing and comprehending the 10th dimensional law of Tao severing, he was also using the dragon burial scripture to engrave the great dragon burial formation in this place. At this time, he successfully completed the great dragon burial formation underground. Once the dragon burial array was completed, he could mobilize the power of the 9-dimensional ancestral vein here to assist him in battle. With the power condensed from the nine-dimensional ancestral vein, under his conscious control, it was naturally extremely powerful. After all, in terms of pure Saint Spirit energy, the nine-dimensional ancestral vein's Saint Spirit energy was frighteningly vast. As the divine dragon swooped down, the void was immediately annihilated. The ninth divine lord's expression changed. With a low roar, he activated the law of Tao severing to the limit and faced the divine dragon head-on. In the blink of an eye, the two sides collided. With a whoosh, the ninth divine lord's law of Tao severing was directly shattered. Then, the dragon's momentum did not decrease as it crashed straight into the ninth divine lord. Poof! Blood splattered, and in an instant, the ninth divine lord exploded. Blood stained the void, and bits of flesh and bones flew all over the sky. Damn it! A shocked and angry voice was heard as the flesh and blood wriggled. The ninth divine lord's spirit was not destroyed, and in the blink of an eye, he reformed his body. After reforming his body, he looked at Lin Tian again. The ninth divine lord's eyes became colder, and his anger and murderous intent grew stronger. Against a mortal from the lower realm of the nine-dimensional realm, his body had been shattered. He was suppressed. On the other side, the eighth divine lord and the seventh divine lord were also moved by this scene. The faint sound of the flute drifted through this space. In this place, only Wu Yi remained calm, playing the song of reincarnation tribulation. Lin Tian's eyes were fixed on fate and reincarnation. His gaze fell on the ninth divine lord. He took a step forward and moved, taking the initiative to close in on the ninth divine lord. Roar! The dragon's roar was ear-piercing. As he moved, the great dragon burial formation that was carved into the ground shone brightly. Boundless ancestral vein Holy Spirit Chi gathered to form another 10,000 feet long divine dragon. Following him, it appeared in front of the ninth divine lord in the blink of an eye and swooped down. The ninth divine lord gritted his teeth and pushed the Tao severing law to its limits once again. All sorts of divine powers and great arts were unleashed one after another. Lin Tian raised his hand, and the reincarnation diagram appeared. Together with the boundless ancestral vein Saint Spiritual Chi, it suppressed his opponent. At the same time, the 10,000-foot-long divine dragon roared, its dragon might shaking the heavens. Pooh! Blood splattered. In just an instant, the ninth divine lord exploded once again. Blood splattered all over the void. However, as the ninth strongest person in the 10 divine realms after the 10 ancestral gods, the ninth divine lord was truly powerful. His spirit was still immortal. In the blink of an eye, it reformed once again. Once again, he unleashed all sorts of divine powers and great arts to meet Lin Tian. Lin Tian's eyes were cold. The three-dimensional sword of heaven and earth cooperated with the ninth-dimensional ancestral vein to attack. Boom! 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 Intense explosions reverberated. The void continued to collapse. The ninth divine lord was shattered again and again. In the blink of an eye, a full hour passed. In that hour, the ninth divine lord was constantly injured. His aura became extremely weak, and he was extremely shocked and furious. Human! He was a god of the 10 divine realms, the ninth divine lord. Yet now, he was injured to such an extent by a mortal from the lower realm. What kind of humiliation was this? Facing the other party's furious roar, Lin Tian's expression did not change. He was still extremely cold. He raised the sword of heaven and earth in his hand and fiercely slashed at the other party. Wherever the sword light passed, it cut through everything. I'll send you on your way. He held the sword of heaven and earth in his right hand and formed a seal with his left hand. Dragon burial world! Roar! The dragon's roar shook heaven and earth. In this place, the boundless territory shook. Hundreds of thousands of large dragons rushed together, and all of them seemed to be real. They were mixed with the extremely vast dragon's divine might, like a rain of divine dragons. Together with the sword of the three-dimensional heaven and earth that he had slashed out, the mighty force pressed down on the ninth divine lord. Everything collapsed. The ninth divine lord trembled violently. He could not help but reveal a look of horror in his eyes. He roared angrily and used all his strength to meet the attack. It was enough to meet the three-dimensional sword of heaven and earth, but in front of hundreds of thousands of dragons, it was insignificant. Hundreds of thousands of dragons swooped down and instantly annihilated everything. Pfft! A mist of blood exploded. The ninth Divine Lord was directly crushed. Moreover, this time, even his spirit was destroyed. His body and soul were destroyed. Old Ninth! The eighth and seventh Divine Lords could not help but call out. The ninth Divine Lord of their lineage was killed just like that. They turned their heads and looked at Lin Tian. Their eyes became extremely cold. Human! Lin Tian looked at the two of them and did not say anything unnecessary. His eyes were cold. The dragon barrier world was unleashed again. He directly controlled hundreds of thousands of dragons and pressed down on the two of them. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of thousands of dragons roared and landed in front of the eighth and seventh Divine Lords. Their voices shook heaven and earth. However, in the next moment, near the eighth Divine Lord and the seventh Divine Lord's ancestral vein dragon heads, countless ancient god runes shone brightly. Their auras were extremely terrifying. In an instant, hundreds of thousands of large dragons were shattered and dissipated. This scene made Lin Tian's expression change immediately. At the same time, the goddesses, saintesses, and others were also shocked. As far as the eye could see, near the ancestral dragon heads of the eighth and ninth Divine Lords, there was a holy light ball about 10 feet in diameter. Within it was a blood-colored ancient broken spear that exuded an extremely terrifying aura. This ancient spear was already broken beyond recognition. It looked like it would shatter with the slightest touch. However, at this time, the aura it exuded seemed to be able to easily penetrate everything in this world. It was extremely terrifying. This is... In action, Old Man trembled slightly. At this time, the ancient spear and the holy light ball exuded an aura that was not inferior to that of a celestial emperor or a human king. Although the sacred weapon that was once used by the ancestral god is on the verge of destruction and is no longer of any use, it can still be activated with a vast amount of pure energy. Although it can only be used once, it is more than enough, the seventh Divine Lord said coldly. For countless years, we have not done anything. Do you think we have not done anything? We have been searching for the nine-dimensional ancestral vein, the eighth Divine Lord said coldly. With the endless power of the ancestral vein in this world, it is enough to activate its killing intent. The ancient blood-colored spear was wrapped in endless pure energy of the ancestral vein. At this moment, the ancestral vein was no longer restrained. With a roar, it fell into the territory and instantly traversed the endless distance, as if it had a mind of its own and left this area. For a time, only the ancient blood-colored spear wrapped in pure energy was vibrating. Extremely terrifying killing intent intertwined here. The wind and clouds surged and the sky changed color. Lin Tianwei trembled. At this moment, even her divine soul felt cold. The killing intent exuded by the ancient spear was too terrifying. He retreated and in a flash, he arrived in front of Wu Yi and the others. He gathered them together and stood in front of the group. Now, with the support of the Reincarnation Tribulation Transcendence song, he was the strongest here. There is no need for this. The seventh Divine Lord looked at Lin Tianwei and said coldly, "We will not use it against you. You are not qualified to do so." When he said this, the group couldn't help but frown. In the next moment, their expressions changed. "You want to break the seal of the ninth dimension sky?" Lin Tianwei's expression changed. He wasn't stupid. Combined with the words of the two, he immediately guessed what they wanted to do with the ancient blood-colored spear. They had spent endless time and energy to find the ninth dimension ancestral vein, and used the endless energy of the ancestral vein to support the broken ancient blood-colored spear. They had stimulated the killing intent of the ancestral god within the ancient spear that could no longer be used. Their goal was to use this killing intent to break the seal his father had set in the ninth dimension sky and kill their way to the lower world. "Don't even think about it." He gritted his teeth. Although he knew that he was no match for these two, he still attacked at this moment. He used all his strength and slashed at the two. Once the seal his father had set in the ninth dimension sky was broken and the divine spirit lineage stepped into the lower world, who knew how many creatures would suffer. Boom! The eighth divine lord and the seventh divine lord snorted. The eighth divine lord smashed the killing intent released by Lin Tianwei with a palm strike. Then, together with the seventh divine lord, they used their will to activate the ancient blood-colored spear, causing it to absorb the endless power of the ancestral vein and turn into a divine rainbow that pierced through the ninth dimension sky. The ancient spear carried the boundless killing intent. Under the stimulation of the ancestral vein's power, it pierced through the barrier of the ninth dimension sky in the blink of an eye. Then, it fell on the Heavenly Emperor's seal. After a stalemate of about 10 breaths, both sides exploded at the same time. The ancient blood-colored spear crumbled and disappeared. The Heavenly Emperor's seal also dissipated. Kill! The eighth Divine Lord and the seventh Divine Lord shouted. Their voices were mixed with the unique will of the Divine Spirit lineage, and it quickly spread to every corner of the ninth dimension sky. In an instant, countless divine spirits within the ninth dimension sky sensed this, and knew that the seal that separated the ninth dimension had been broken. Kill! 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 The word kill resounded one after another. On this day, one divine spirit after another broke through the barrier of the ninth dimension sky and killed their way to the lower world. In the place where the ancestral vein of the ninth dimension rose, Lin Tianwei's expression suddenly changed. Even Wu Yi was no exception. His daughter, parents, and other relatives and sisters were now in the eighth dimension sky, and they would bear the brunt of the divine spirit lineage's attack. It was also at this time that the eighth divine lord and the seventh divine lord's gaze fell on the group of people. Their eyes were cold and indifferent. It's your turn, the seventh divine lord said, his gaze falling on Lin Tianwei. As a mortal from the lower world, you are not bad. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. Chapter 2478. The seventh divine lord raised his hand, and the great palm of Saint Energy pressed down on Lin Tian in the blink of an eye. He was much more powerful than the ninth divine lord, and they were not on the same level at all. He immediately froze the space around them. Lin Tian's face suddenly changed. He gently pushed the goddess, Wu Yi, and the others away, and summoned the diagram of samsara. At the same time, he pushed the three-dimensional sword of heaven and earth to its limit and met the seventh divine lord's palm. Whoosh! The two collided, and with a soft sound, the full power he had summoned was instantly annihilated. The seventh divine lord's eyes were cold, and his palm pressed down without slowing down. A mortal is still a mortal. Even if you have control of samsara, even if your comprehension is extremely strong, in essence, you can't compare to a god. As he spoke, he suddenly trembled, and the great palm of Saint Energy pressing down on Lin Tian collapsed, and he stumbled back. At the same time, a figure silently appeared beside Lin Tian. It was a young man, slender and handsome, and his eyes were as deep as the boundless sea of stars. His gaze fell on Lin Tian, and the man's deep eyes gradually softened, and he revealed a gentle smile. Lin Tian instantly trembled, his eyes involuntarily widening a little. He could sense an extremely intimate aura from this man, and even his divine soul was trembling slightly. This feeling was hundreds of times stronger than when he first saw the goddess. On the other side, the goddess, saints, old man Wu, and little Tianyin, who had been pushed away by him, were all moved. Uncle Heavenly Emperor! Little Tianyin could not help but call out. As soon as these words came out, Wu Yi's eyes moved. This was the Heavenly Emperor. Lin Tian's father? Lin Tian also heard Tianyin's words, and although he had some guesses in his heart, he was still shocked. At the same time, two whooshing sounds broke through the air, and the eighth and seventh divine lords immediately flew away, their eyes filled with unconcealable horror. However, they had only escaped 1,000 feet away when the two of them froze, and their bodies collapsed inch by inch, turning into ashes in the blink of an eye. Such a scene caused Lin Tian to tremble involuntarily. Even Wu Yi was taken aback. She did not see any sign of the Sky Emperor making a move. In fact, from the moment he appeared, his back was facing the 8th and 7th Divine Lords. He did not even look at them. However, the two people who were fleeing in terror had their bodies and souls destroyed by themselves. What kind of power was this? Wasn't this too frightening? Lin Tian looked at the celestial arch. This was the first time he had seen the man he was supposed to call father. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. The Sky Emperor chuckled and placed his hand on Lin Tian's head. "You've grown up and become stronger," he said. "Speaking of which, I'm not a good father. I should apologize." Lin Tian shook his head. "You are fighting for the sake of all living beings in the world. You are very noble." He smiled. "I am proud of you." This was the first time he saw his father. Although his heart was in turmoil, he was not as excited as when he saw his mother, the Divine Lady. He could not explain the reason. Perhaps it was because children were closer to their mothers, just like the little Tai Chu. At this time, he was also moved by another point. The hand that his father, the Celestial Emperor, placed on his head did not have the feeling of a physical body. Obviously, this was not his real body, but merely a wisp of divine sense. This caused his heart to twitch. It was just a wisp of divine consciousness, but it was enough to silently obliterate the two divine lords. Hearing Lin Tian's words, the Sky Emperor was slightly taken aback. Then, his smile grew wider. "You really know how to talk. Are you sincere?" "Sincere." Lin Tian nodded. His father was indeed fighting for the sake of all living beings in the world. How could he not be proud to have such a father? These were indeed his heartfelt words. The Sky Emperor's smile grew wider. However, there was a hint of guilt in his eyes. Compared to the Divine Lady, he knew about Lin Tian's encounter in the 4th dimension much earlier. That matter made him, an invincible existence in the 9th dimension, feel uncomfortable. At this time, the Divine Lady, Saintess, and the others all walked over. "Uncle Sky Emperor, you are still so powerful!" Tianyin looked at him with admiration. "Little girl, are you all right now?" The Sky Emperor looked at Tianyin. He was very amiable and slightly surprised. "Yes, my husband saved Tianyin." Tianyin looked at Lin Tian. "Lin Tian. Little Lin used the samsara origin to erase that special energy," Old Man Wu explained to the Sky Emperor. Then, his expression changed slightly. He could tell that the Sky Emperor was not his real body. "Little Tian, you are." The Sky Emperor chuckled and said, "Before I stepped into the 10 Directions divine domain, I left a wisp of divine consciousness in the 9th dimension," he said. "The seal that seals the 9th dimension sky has been broken, so this strand of divine sense that was left inside has manifested." Lin Tian's expression changed. It was indeed just a wisp of divine consciousness. "You left a wisp of divine consciousness in there. Even I didn't know about it." The Divine Lady looked at the Sky Emperor strangely and asked, "What's your purpose?" She knew the Sky Emperor well. He would never do anything unnecessary. Since he left a wisp of divine consciousness in the 9th dimension, it must have a special meaning. "If the seal is broken, the wisp of divine consciousness I left inside will turn the broken seal into an imperial seal," the Sky Emperor said. The Divine Lady's eyes widened. In the next moment, she moved. She tore open the heavenly barrier of the 9th dimension and looked outside. At this time, the seal outside the 9th dimension disappeared, but there were dense light seals intertwining. At the same time, there was a bloody mist spreading outside the 9th dimension. The bloody mist was intertwined with a very strong divine aura. It was obvious that the divine beings who rushed out of the 9th dimension were attacked by the surrounding light seals the moment they rushed out, and then their bodies and souls were destroyed. The light seals were so dense that they surrounded the entire 9th dimension. She stepped back to where she was before. "After the seal, you set up this step. You are really—" Seeing that Lin Tian and the others were slightly puzzled, she pulled out a divine consciousness imprint and showed them what she saw. This caused Lin Tian and the others' expressions to change. With a single glance, one could tell that those light seals contained extremely terrifying destructive power. Now, they had actually enveloped the entire ninth dimension. In other words, the divine beings in the ninth dimension were still unable to leave. Once they dared to step out of the ninth dimension, they would be destroyed by those terrifying light seals. Just like the bloody mist floating outside the ninth dimension, it was obvious that it was the divine beings who had died tragically after stepping out of the ninth dimension. Then, if someone from the eighth dimension ascends, or if we go out, won't we suffer together? Lin Tian asked. It only targets the divine body, the Sky Emperor said. Lin Tian was instantly relieved. It only targeted the divine body, which meant that it only targeted the divine beings. Although he didn't know what method his father used to make these imperial seals only attack the divine beings, he was now relieved. The heavens and the living beings in the ninth dimension, as well as his other relatives and friends, were not threatened by the divine beings. As expected of the Sky Emperor, the All-Heaven's Holy Maiden smiled. It was hard not to be shocked by such a sophisticated arrangement. On this day, the group was originally moved by the fact that the divine beings were about to step into the lower dimension after the seal of the ninth dimension was broken. Lin Tian and Wu Yi were the most worried, but now they were relieved. Lin Tian introduced Wu Yi to the Sky Emperor, and then asked about the ancestral gods of the 10 directions. His master and father had been restraining the ancestral gods of the 10 directions for such a long time. Could it be that they had been fighting all this time? That seemed impossible. The river of time, the past era, the Sky Emperor said. As soon as these words came out, Lin Tian's expression changed. At the same time, the others were also moved. They understood what the Sky Emperor meant. The Sky Emperor and the Human King had pulled the ancestral gods of the divine beings into the past era and restrained them in the past. Stepping into the past was an extremely terrifying thing. Moreover, the more powerful the person was, the more dangerous it was to step into the past era. This was because the time that had already passed could not be disturbed. This was the rule of heaven and earth, and no one could break it. Stepping into the past era, some extremely powerful people would sometimes even make a casual move and their bodies and souls would be destroyed. The Sky Emperor chuckled and looked at Lin Tian with some light in his eyes. With your masters and my battle strength, even if we work together, we can't beat him at all. We can only use this method to restrain him. In the past, if we can't move, he can't move either. Looking at Lin Tian, he said, the future depends on you. The time we can restrain him like this is not much. The past era can no longer accommodate us. At most, in another 10 years, we will return to the modern era. His divine consciousness began to blur and disappear bit by bit. Protect your mother and master's wife, and control the reincarnation cycle. His gaze fell on Lin Tian. His gaze was gentle, and he rubbed Lin Tian's head with a smile. Then, his divine consciousness disappeared. Lin Tian stood still. After a pause, he nodded seriously. I'm going into seclusion, he said to the goddess and Wu Yi. His father and master had risked their lives to pull the 10 ancestral gods into the past era. At most, they could hold them back for another 10 years. During this time, he had to cultivate with all his strength and strive to control the reincarnation cycle completely within 10 years. The goddess and the others naturally had no objections. They immediately left and headed to a place with the densest saint spirit chi. In another part of the ninth dimension. Damn it! That damned Sky Emperor! The dozens of divine sovereigns of the divine spirit lineage looked at the densely packed imperial seals outside the ninth dimensional heavenly barrier. They watched as the divine spirits of their lineage were instantly annihilated by the imperial seals after charging out. Their faces were extremely ugly. They never thought that the Sky Emperor would have set up such a follow-up plan. After the ninth dimension heavenly barrier was destroyed with great difficulty, it turned into a dense array of imperial seals. On this day, more than 10,000 of their divine spirit clan brethren were killed in an instant. There were even a few divine sovereigns who were killed by the imperial seals the moment they rushed out of the ninth dimension heavenly barrier. Now, the ninth dimension heavenly barrier was destroyed, but they still couldn't step out of the ninth dimension. They didn't dare to take a single step out of the ninth dimension. Damn it! Damn it! Damn it! The eyes of these divine sovereigns were filled with killing intent, and their eyes turned red. In a vast group of immortal mountains in the ninth dimension heavenly barrier, Lin Tian, the goddess, and the others left the place they were at before and stepped into the group of immortal mountains. The saint spirit chi in this group of mountains was very dense. Lin Tian, the goddess, and the saintesses of all heaven set up dozens of sealing arrays to isolate the aura here. Then, they began to cultivate in seclusion. Chapter 2479. Sitting cross-legged in the celestial mountain, Lin Tian immediately immersed himself in cultivation. The saint spirit chi in the celestial mountain was very dense. He circulated the Reincarnation Heart Sutra, and the billowing saint spirit chi intertwined. He used the saint spirit chi to surround his body and cooperate with the unsealed soul root to cultivate seriously. Outside his body, his aura became stronger, and his cultivation increased bit by bit. At the same time, Wu Yi and Tianyin also began to cultivate with him. After all, the saint spirit chi in this place was very dense, and their cultivation was still relatively low, so they naturally had to cultivate together to improve their realm. The goddess, saintess, and old man Wu Wei all had high enough cultivation, so they did not cultivate in seclusion. They stood guard for the three of them. Time passed, and in the blink of an eye, a year had passed. A year later, on this day, there was a thump, and a shocking thunder vortex intertwined on the celestial mountain range. Black lightning intertwined in the thunder vortex, crackling, and a destructive aura came down mightily. He has stepped out of the ninth dimensional realm. The goddess spoke, her eyes releasing radiance. Beside her, the saintess nodded. This speed! Old man Wu Wei was shocked. In a year, Lin Tian stepped into the heaven and earth supreme realm from the mid-ninth dimensional realm and attracted the heaven and earth supreme tribulation. Such a heavenly tribulation was so terrifying that Wu Yi and little Tianyin, who were cultivating, were also awakened at the same time. Lin Tian opened his eyes, stood up, and tilted his head to look toward the south. He took a simple step, and the aura of the law of space intertwined around him. In a flash, he was infinitely far away, and appeared in a desert tens of millions of miles away. As he moved, the thunder vortex moved with him and appeared in this desert at the same time. Then, with a thump, thunder exploded, and the first round of the main lightning punishment immediately came down. Lin Tian was not afraid of this. Now, the heavenly tribulation was not a threat to him at all. He took out the reincarnation sword and went through the tribulation as before, using the lightning punishment to temper it. Boom! 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 The main lightning punishment came down one after another, and it was not until a full day later that the lightning punishment dissipated. 7 colored auspicious clouds intertwined, and he used them to temper his body. At the same time, he rebuilt the reincarnation sword that was shattered by the lightning punishment. Now that his cultivation had stepped into the heaven and earth supreme realm, the reincarnation sword had become a heaven and earth supreme treasure. It was far from being compared to ordinary heaven and earth supreme treasures' weapons. It was almost the king of all supreme treasures. Compared to that ancient spear, it is too weak. He muttered to himself as he recalled the ancestral god battle spear from a year ago. Just the murderous intent emitted by that ancient spear was far from what his reincarnation sword could compare to. The gap between the two was like the gap between heaven and earth. Therefore, he naturally knew that although he had stepped into the heaven and earth supreme realm, he had made a huge leap in all aspects, and his fighting power was terrifyingly strong. However, compared to the ancestral gods of 10 directions, there was still an insurmountable gap. He had even estimated the strength of his father's strand of divine thought from a year ago, and regretfully discovered that his full strength was still a little lacking compared to his father's strand of divine thought. He was shocked. Father and Master, how high have they reached the heaven and earth supreme realm? His soul root was extremely powerful and his potential was limitless. With such potential, he had reached the level of a supreme being of heaven and earth. Now, he could clearly feel how powerful he was. He was confident that he could kill the seventh Divine Lord, the eighth Divine Lord, and the others that he had encountered previously with just a lift of his hand. However, he felt that he could not compare to the divine thought that his father had manifested back then. Therefore, he could not imagine how powerful his father and his master, who was as famous as his father, were. How terrifying would the ancestral gods of 10 directions be if even his father and master could not defeat them when they joined forces. The rainbow auspicious clouds dispersed. He paused on the spot, put away the samsara sword, and returned to his previous place. The goddess and saintesses of all heavens walked up to him happily. When Lin Tian was still in the 9th dimension, his fighting power was already not inferior to theirs when he worked with the three-dimensional world. Now that he had reached the heaven and earth supreme realm, with the cooperation of the three-dimensional world and Wu Yi's assistance, how strong was his strongest fighting power now? It was estimated that he could wipe out all the gods in the 9th dimension. No one could resist him. Congratulations, little Lin, Old Man Wu said. At the same time, he sighed. He had been at the peak of the 9th dimension for countless years, but Lin Tian had reached the heaven and earth supreme realm from the mid-9th dimension in just a year. How terrifying was such talent! At this time, he could only sigh in his heart. As expected of the person who had inherited the heavenly emperor's bloodline. He was really too terrifying. My husband is really amazing, Tianyin said sweetly. In a year's time, he had reached the heaven ascension realm from the Saint King realm, which was a great improvement. Wu Yi did not say anything. His gaze was gentle. His cultivation had reached the peak of the creation realm, and he could step into the tribulation realm at any time. Lin Tian and the others chuckled. On this day, he came out of seclusion and did not continue to cultivate for the time being. Instead, he chatted with the group for a day before continuing to cultivate in seclusion. With his heaven and earth supreme realm cultivation, he began to comprehend the path of reincarnation. Wu Yi and Tianyin continued to cultivate, while the goddess, saintesses of all heavens, and Old Man Wu continued to protect the three of them. 1. Wisps of light intertwined here, and Lin Tian devoted himself to comprehending the path of reincarnation. With his heaven and earth supreme realm cultivation base, he quickly gained some insights, and his control of the path of reincarnation became more and more profound. In the blink of an eye, half a year passed. In half a year, the origin reincarnation light intertwined outside his body, becoming thicker and purer. However, after half a year, his path of reincarnation reached a bottleneck, and it was difficult for him to move forward. There's only a little left, but... He frowned. He felt that he was not far away from mastering the path of reincarnation to greater mastery, but that little bit of distance was difficult to cross. After a pause, he closed his eyes again and continued to comprehend. In the blink of an eye, another half a year passed. Another half a year later, he opened his eyes. He still had not made any progress in the path of reincarnation, and it was difficult for him to cross that little bit of distance. Forget it. In the end, he gave up for the time being and stood up. On this day, he temporarily stopped his seclusion to comprehend. The goddess and saintesses of all heavens walked up to him and asked about his results. I'm just a little bit away from mastering the path of reincarnation, but no matter what, it's difficult to make any progress. He told them the truth. It's all right, you're just a little bit away. We still have 8 years. The goddess comforted him. Lin Tian smiled bitterly. Although he was just a little bit away from mastering the path of reincarnation, only he knew how difficult it was to cross that little bit of distance. He did not even have the confidence to cross that little bit of distance. However, he would naturally not reveal this matter. He paused for a moment before he looked at Wu Yi and little Tianyin at the side. Wu Yi and little Tianyin had also stopped cultivating. I've reached the path conversion realm, little Tianyin said sweetly as if she was reporting. After 2 years, she had grown a little taller and looked more beautiful than 2 years ago. She was a creature of the 9th dimension, and her bloodline power was extraordinary. Moreover, her life essence had been transformed by a special energy. Now, her cultivation could be said to be smooth sailing. Beside her, Wu Yi did not say anything. His cultivation had reached the tribulation realm and he had already passed the tribulation. "Are you still going to continue your seclusion?" the goddess asked. "Not for the time being." Lin Tian shook his head and said after a pause, "There are many gods in the ninth dimension. I'm going to deal with some of them." Now, he was only a little bit away from reaching greater mastery in the path of reincarnation, but he was really unable to cross that little bit of distance. At this time, he wanted to clear out some of the gods in the ninth dimension. At the same time, he wanted to test his current strongest combat strength. Regarding this, the goddess and the saintess of all heavens naturally did not have any objections. Immediately the group left. "I wonder if the temporary strongholds of the lineage of gods are still there," the goddess said and told Lin Tian a few coordinates with her divine sense. "Let's go and take a look." Lin Tian andao. He used the law of spacetime with his supreme level of cultivation, and a spacetime vortex intertwined around him. In the blink of an eye, he, the goddess, and the others were sucked in. The next moment, they appeared in a vast immortal mountain. As far as the eye could see, there was a very large palace towering in the middle of the immortal mountain, surrounded by an extremely powerful aura of gods. This was the temporary headquarters of the lineage of gods in the ninth dimension. "It's still there," Lin Tian muttered to himself. Looking at the place in front of him, he moved his mind slightly, and a large number of sword lights slashed forward. With a clang, the sword whistled and cut the huge palace into pieces. A bloody mist exploded there. There were obviously many gods in the vicinity of the palace, and more than half of them died under this sword. "Who is it?" a cold voice rang out. 3 figures stepped out from the shattered palace, their eyes cold and frightening. Beside them were more than 100 other figures. 7 of them were ordinary divine emperors, and the rest were ninth-dimensional gods. The 6th divine emperor, the 5th divine emperor, and the 4th divine emperor. The goddess frowned as her gaze fell on the 3 people in the lead. She knew about the 10 divine emperors below the ancestral god level of the lineage of gods from the sea of consciousness of other gods. At this time, when she saw these 3 people, she immediately recognized them. Almost at the same time, the 6th divine emperor and the others naturally recognized her, as well as the saintess of all heavens beside her. Their eyes lit up. "Goddess! Saintess of all heavens!" the 6th divine emperor said, his gaze falling on the goddess and the saintess of all heavens, temporarily ignoring Lin Tian, Wu Yi, Tianyin, and the others. "You really have the guts to barge in here. Very good! Very good! You saved us the time of looking for you." Chapter 2480. The few monarchs looked at Lin Tian's group with cold gazes. Especially when they looked at the goddess, their gazes were extremely cold. Back then, when they stepped out of the 10th divine domain, they were prepared to find the heart of the 10th dimension and integrate all of heaven and earth into the 10th divine domain. However, they didn't expect that the Sky Emperor would directly seal off the 9th dimensional sky, trapping them within the 9th dimensional sky and preventing them from stepping into the lower heaven and earth. During this long period of time, their bloodline had been thinking of ways to break this seal and finally broke it 2 years ago. However, they didn't expect that the Sky Emperor would have a follow-up plan. The seal that was broken instantly turned into numerous Emperor seals that enveloped the entire 9th dimensional sky and wiped out tens of thousands of their bloodline brethren in an instant. They still could not step out of the 9th dimension. They were still sealed in the 9th dimension by the Celestial Emperor. "We won't kill you, we'll suppress you and make the Celestial Emperor feel pain," the 6th Divine Lord, who had attacked, said in a voice that was bone-chilling. He hated the Celestial Emperor so much that he wanted nothing more than to devour his flesh and blood. Now, looking at the goddess, the person closest to the Celestial Emperor, the murderous intent in his eyes was frighteningly thick. At the same time, the other gods also had the same look in their eyes. The 6th Divine Lord's giant hand pressed down on the group of people in the blink of an eye. Its power seemed to have frozen everything. It was also at this time that Lin Tian made his move. He did not make any unnecessary movements, and merely flicked his finger. With a whoosh, a beam of sword light flew out and shattered the sixth Divine Lord's giant palm of divine power. The sword light did not dissipate, and its momentum did not diminish as it sank into the sixth Divine Lord's glabella. Blood splattered everywhere, and the chill in the sixth Divine Lord's eyes disappeared in an instant. He was stunned and said, "What's going on?" These 3 words came out of his mouth. Then, in the next moment, his body crumbled into pieces and turned into a bloody mist. His body and soul had been destroyed. Such a scene instantly caused the expressions of all the people in the area to change. "Impossible!" the 4th Divine Lord exclaimed, his eyes full of shock. The 5th Divine Lord and the other gods also changed their expressions. The 6th Divine Lord of their lineage, the 6th strongest person below the ancestor god level, had been obliterated by a human with a flick of his finger. How could this be? At the same time, the goddesses and saintesses of all heavens paled. They had expected that Lin Tian would be extremely powerful after reaching the heaven and earth's supreme realm. However, they had not expected him to be this powerful. Facing the 6th Divine Lord, who was far stronger than the 7th Divine Lord, he had actually killed him with a flick of his finger. What kind of combat strength was this? One should know that Lin Tian had just stepped into the heaven and earth supreme realm. Yet he possessed such fighting strength when he had just stepped into this realm. This was simply too frightening. Lin Tian's expression did not change. His eyes fell on the 5th Divine Lord and the 4th Divine Lord as he walked towards them. He took a step forward, and in the next instant, he appeared in front of the 4th Divine Lord. He tapped the center of the 4th Divine Lord's brows. The 4th Divine Emperor was horrified. He had not seen Lin Tian's movements at all. "You pooh!" Lin Tian didn't say anything. The tip of his finger that was pointed at the center of the opponent's eyebrows burst forth with sword light. With a pu sound, the sword light pierced through the opponent. His divine soul was obliterated as well. This, old man Wei could not help but tremble. In this place, the 4th Divine Lord was the strongest person in the lineage of gods. He was the 4th strongest person in the lineage of gods below the ancestral gods of 10 directions. Yet he had been killed so easily. The 5th Divine Lord and the other Divine Lords were trembling. One by one, they retreated with horror in their eyes. In the next moment, the sound of something breaking through the air was heard. All the Divine Lords fled as fast as they could. The 4th Divine Lord, the strongest existence in this place, had been killed so easily. At this moment, all the Divine Lords knew that in this place, there was absolutely no one who could stop Lin Tian. Lin Tian looked at these people. With a slight movement of his mind, the Tao Cutter Law was brought out. The Tao Cutter Law filled the sky and swept out at an extremely fast speed. This was the law of the 10th dimension. Wherever it passed, all things withered. Puff, puff, puff. Bloody mists exploded one after another. In the blink of an eye, except for the 5th Divine Lord, all the other Divine Lords had died tragically. You! The 5th Divine Lord's face was pale. He did not run anymore because the 10 directions space had been completely sealed by Lin Tian. Lin Tian looked at this person. He had deliberately left this person behind. At this moment, his right eye, the Rinnegan, opened instantly. It was stronger than before. The reincarnation Tao pattern in it was dreamy and illusory. He used the reincarnation illusion technique to read everything in the other party's sea of consciousness. Then, after reading everything in the other party's sea of consciousness, he used the reincarnation galaxy to obliterate the other party. In an instant, the place became silent. All the Divine Lords here were killed. "My husband is too powerful," Tianyin said, her big eyes shining. Old Man Wei and the others were also shocked. The current Lin Tian's combat strength was really terrifying. Apart from the ancestral gods of 10 directions, the Celestial Emperor, and the Human King, he was basically invincible. Lin Tian chuckled and said to the group, "Let's go somewhere else." From the 5th Divine Lord's Sea of Consciousness, he learned about the situation of the Divine Lord's lineage. In this lineage, a small portion of the Divine Lords had stepped out of the 10 Directions Divine Dominion. Most of the Divine Lords were still in the 10 Directions Divine Dominion. Now, the Divine Lords who had stepped out of the 10 Directions Divine Dominion and lived in the 9 Dimensions Heaven still had 8 large strongholds. He already knew the locations of all of them, and was prepared to destroy them one by one. He was also quite satisfied with his combat strength in this battle. Although he was still far from being comparable to his father and teacher, he was already completely invincible compared to the Divine Lords in the 9 Dimensions Heaven. On this day, he used the space-time law to move with the goddess, Wu Yi, and the others. They stepped into the strongholds of the Divine Lords in the 9 Dimensions Heaven one after another and attacked mercilessly. In the blink of an eye, all the Divine Lords in the strongholds were slaughtered. Then, he began to wander in the 9 Dimensions Heaven and attack the other Divine Lords who were scattered in various locations in the 9 Dimensions Heaven. "You are human!" Screams and anger sounded from time to time in the 9 Dimensions Heaven. The blood of the Divine Lords dyed the void red. In a short 3 months, he wandered the 9 Dimensions Heaven and wiped out all the Divine Lords in the 9 Dimensions Heaven. A descendant of the goddess and the heavenly emperor? A disciple of the human king and the saintess? This. No. No wonder he's so strong. We're saved. The 9 Dimensions Heaven's inhabitants were not extinct yet. During these 3 months, as Lin Tian, goddess Wu Yi, and the others stepped into one area after another and hunted the Divine Lords in the 9 Dimensions Heaven, the cultivators of the 9 Dimensions Heaven naturally saw this process and were shocked by Lin Tian's strength. At the same time, they also learned of Lin Tian's identity, and couldn't help but be shocked. During these 3 months, the 9 Dimensions Heaven was peaceful. At this moment, Lin Tian, the goddess, and the others were standing on a magnificent immortal mountain. The 9 Dimensions Heaven is peaceful now. I want to return to the 4th dimension and try to fuse with the heart of the 10th dimension that Master found. On this immortal mountain, Lin Tian was standing on Lin Tian Andao. The heart of the 10th dimension was the core of the 10 divine domains. Although he couldn't fully comprehend the reincarnation cycle, as long as he could fuse with the heart of the 10th dimension, he would be able to suppress the Divine Lords and end this war. After all, once he fused with the heart of the 10th dimension, it was equivalent to controlling the 10 divine domains. All the Divine Lords born in the 10 divine domains would be unable to resist. Although it's very difficult, it's worth a try, the saintess said. Back then, even the human king couldn't fuse with the heart of the 10th dimension, but she felt that Lin Tian might be able to do it. After all, although Lin Tian's current strength was far from the human king's, he controlled reincarnation and had terrifying potential. When these two were combined, it might create a miracle and successfully fuse with the heart of the 10th dimension. The goddess and Wu Yi also nodded in agreement. Thus, on this day, Lin Tian and the others left the 9th dimension and stepped into the 8th dimension. During this process, the dense imperial imprints outside the 9th dimension did not have any reaction to them. This was because these imperial imprints were imprinted by the celestial emperor using a special method. They only targeted the pure divine bodies and divine spirits, so they did not affect other people. Let's find Yer first, then we'll find the others together. Lin Tian Andao. In the 9th dimension, he had killed a large number of divine lords. During this process, he had obtained many rare treasures and was preparing to share them with the others so that they could improve their cultivation. The reason why he first looked for Yenya was because she had the divination technique. As long as he found her, he would be able to quickly find Ruoxian, Jiyu, and the others. After that, he spent 3 days looking for Yenya. Yenya was with Ruoxian, Jiyu, Bai Qiu, and the others. Grandma! Ruoxian's eyes lit up. Before Lin Tian could introduce the goddess, she had already rushed over. Back then, Lin Tian had shown her the appearance of the goddess. She remembered it very clearly, so she instantly recognized her at this moment. The goddess was naturally very happy. This was her granddaughter. Then, Lin Tian introduced Jiyu, Bai Qiu, and the others to her. Jiyu and the others came forward to greet her one after another. They were a little nervous. After all, This grandma was the supreme being of the ninth dimension. Good, 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 very good. The goddess was naturally very happy. Ruoxian hugged the goddess' arm and paused for a moment. Her gaze fell on Tianyin. She jumped in front of little Tianyin and pinched her cheeks. Her beautiful big eyes were full of light. What a beautiful little sister! Let me carry you! As she said that, she really picked up little Tianyin. Lin Tian, the All-Heaven's Saintess, coughed and said, That's your little mother. Grand Preceptor's wife, you really know how to joke. Ruoxian didn't believe it. Tianyin wasn't even as old as her. Wu Yi looked at her. Don't be rude. Ruoxian's eyes immediately widened. After all, they were mother and daughter. She naturally understood what Wu Yi meant. Really? She hugged Tianyin and looked at Lin Tian in disbelief. Lin Tian wanted to cover his face. How could he say this? It's true, the goddess said on his behalf. Ruoxian trembled. She stared at little Tianyin in her arms with wide eyes. Then, she put little Tianyin down with a whoosh. Daddy, you've become such a beast, cough, how did you do this? She glared at Lin Tian. Her father had found her an 8-year-old little mother? Lin Tian. What a sin! Chapter 2481. So that's how it is. After hearing Wu Yi's explanation, Ruoxian couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. She said in relief, So it was Grandma who decided on this marriage in the past. You should have told me earlier. I thought Daddy had become a beast, indecent. Lin Tian. Daughter, what are you trying to say after the word beast? That's twice. Lil Miss, I'm sorry. But Lil Miss, you're really beautiful. You're already so beautiful now, you'll definitely be even more beautiful in the future. Ruoxian looked at Tianyin and apologized to her. Then, as she looked at her, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. This 8-year-old girl, who wasn't even as old as her, was actually her Lil Miss. Wu Yi tilted her head and glanced at her. Ahem. Ruoxian coughed dryly and quickly stopped laughing. She bowed seriously to little Tianyin. Hello, Lil Miss, it's okay. Ruoxian is very cute. Tianyin naturally didn't care about this. After all, there was nothing to care about. On the contrary, she really liked Ruoxian. Ruoxian was really very cute. Jiyu, Sushu, Shuiyi, and Baiqiu naturally didn't have any objections after hearing the whole story. After all, in theory, little Tianyin was actually older than them. The girls all stepped forward and introduced themselves to Tianyin. Hello, sisters. Little Tianyin was much older than Jiyu and Shuiyi. However, because she had been sealed in the eternal heavenly ice for many years, she didn't grow at all. Now, she still looked like an 8-year-old. She was very polite to Jiyu, Shuiyi, and the others. Tianyin is really beautiful. Yes, she probably won't lose out to Sister Wu Yi in the future, Jiyu and the others said. They weren't being polite. Tianyin was really very beautiful now. She was only 8 years old, but she already had a peerless appearance. After chatting for a while, Lin Tian asked Yenye to use the divination technique to deduce the other people's whereabouts. Now that Yenye was in the tribulation realm, she immediately used the divine divination technique to deduce the situation. Soon, she calculated the whereabouts of all her old friends and told Lin Tian the detailed coordinates. Lin Tian immediately moved. Using the law of time and space, he quickly gathered all his old friends. Mistress! As Empyrean Divine Seal, Empyrean Primal Chaos, Empyrean Proud Sword, and the others saw the true body of the All-Heaven Saintess, they were all excited. They all bowed deeply and then bowed towards the goddess. Greetings, Senior. You're welcome. Please rise. The goddess was extremely courteous. She personally helped the 9 people up and then thanked them. During those years in the 4-dimensional world, the 9 of them had taken care of Lin Tian a lot. In the beginning, it was the 9 of them who guided Lin Tian in her cultivation. It was also because of Lin Tian that she reincarnated. She had learned about this from the All-Heaven's Saintesses. She had always been grateful to the 9 of them, and had long wanted to thank them personally. We're senior brothers. It's our responsibility to take care of our junior brother. Feng Shuntianzun smiled. Bai Ziki, Yi Feng Tian, Yang Qi, Ling Yun, Little Tai Shu, Wishing Crocodile, Fanning Xiong, Yi Tong, Little Fox, and Mu Chen also stepped forward and bowed to the goddess and saintesses. Wu Yi's parents, Mu Xingshu and Shin Qi, were also there. Lin Tian introduced the two of them to the goddess with great respect. In-laws, this is the first time we've met. Thank you. The goddess took Shin Qi's hand and looked at Wu Yi. She sincerely said to Shin Qi and Mu Xingshu, "Thank you for having such a good daughter." Wu Yi had helped Lin Tian a lot. She had been quietly assisting Lin Tian. She liked Wu Yi very much. The group gathered in the 8th dimensional world. Then, Lin Tian led the group into the 4th dimensional world and returned to the immortal court of the 10 Directions Ancient Star. He distributed the treasures to them. Then, he, the goddess, saintesses, and Wu Yi went to the 10th heaven of the 10 Directions Ancient Star. Ji Yu, Tianyin, and the others were cultivating in the immortal court of the 10 Directions. Old Man Wu Wei, who was at the end of the 9th dimension, was there to protect them. There was nothing to worry about. Moreover, they were very safe in the 10 Directions Ancient Star even if there was no one to protect them. During the 3 months when Wu was killing gods in the 9th dimension, he had already refined many extraordinary divine items. Now that his cultivation base had reached the 9th dimension, there was no need for him to continue refining other treasures of heaven and earth. The 4 of them stepped into the 10th heaven. This heaven was very vast. Green grass grew everywhere, making it look like a green ocean. "It's here," Lin Tian muttered to himself. He had obtained more detailed information about the heart of the 10th dimension from the saintesses. It wasn't the complete 10 Directions Ancient Star, but the 10th heaven. The 9 heavens below were formed by the insignificant strands of energy that overflowed from the heart of the 10th dimension. No wonder I felt the boundless vastness of this heaven. It's even more vast than the other heavens I've seen. Back then, by chance, he felt an incomparably vast feeling in the 10th heaven. At that time, he was very concerned about this heaven. It turns out that this 10th heaven is the true heart of the 10th dimension. At the same time, he thought of the ancient legends circulating in the 10 Directions heavens. As long as one ascended to the 10th heaven, they would obtain eternal life and become the omnipotent 10 Directions Divine King. Regarding this legend, everyone only cared about the 2 words eternal life. No one cared about the 4 words 10 Directions Divine King. Perhaps, in the past, the cultivation world of the 10 Directions Divine King only regarded the 10 Directions Divine King as the king of the 10 Directions heavens. They believed that if one ascended to the 10th heaven and attained eternal life, they would be the strongest person in the 10 Directions Divine King. However, the 10 Directions Divine King wasn't the king of the 10 Directions heavens, but the king of the 10th dimension. As for the origin of this legend, he gradually began to have doubts. He didn't know how this legend spread in the 10 Directions heavens. He believed that in the past, there was absolutely no one who truly understood the meaning of the legendary 10 Directions Divine King. There was absolutely no one who knew that the 10th heaven was the heart of the 10th dimension. Could it be that the heart of the 10th dimension has affected the wills of some living beings in the 10 Directions heaven? However, the affected living beings were unable to fully comprehend the will, which led to the spread of this legend? He guessed in his heart. He felt that this guess wasn't unreasonable. After all, since the God's spirit race was born, there was a kind of will that existed in their heart. By fusing with the heart of the 10th dimension, they could become the 10 Directions Divine King. This was very similar to his guess, and the possibility was very high. Thinking of this in his heart, he stood in the 10th heaven. After a pause, he said goodbye to the goddess, saintess, and Wu Yi, and walked a few dozen feet forward. Standing in the 10th heaven, he closed his eyes to feel this heaven. Now that his cultivation base had reached the level of heaven and earth sovereign, he could already feel the extraordinariness of this heaven. In his eyes, this was just the 10th heaven. There were only ordinary stones and grass in it, but in his divine sense, this was a vast heaven and earth with endless stars intertwining around it. He used his divine sense of origin to try to merge into this heaven. At the same time, He also tried to merge his divine sense of life into this heaven, pulling it into his body. Whoosh! In the 10th heaven, a gentle breeze was produced in an instant. Then, gradually, this breeze became blazing hot. With a bang, Lin Tian's body trembled violently, and he staggered back. He tried to integrate his divine sense and his divine sense into the 10th heaven, trying to pull it into his body, but in the blink of an eye, they were all pushed back, and his divine soul was shaken, causing severe pain. He paused, frowned, and continued to try, but he still failed. He couldn't fuse with it at all. It's not working. He shook his head and returned to the side of the goddess and the others. The saintess was a little disappointed. Originally, she thought that Lin Tian, who controlled reincarnation and awakened his soul root, might be able to fuse with the heart of the 10th dimension, but she didn't expect that he still couldn't succeed. It's okay, little 10, don't be discouraged. After all, even an invincible existence like the 10 Directions' divine ancestor couldn't fuse with it. The difficulty of fusing with it is estimated that it won't be much lower than mastering reincarnation. She comforted Lin Tian. Lin Tian wasn't discouraged, because from the beginning, he didn't have much hope of successfully fusing with the heart of the 10th dimension. He just wanted to come back and give it a try. It would be good if he succeeded, but it didn't matter if he failed. Oh, Mother Wui, why don't you give it a try? He said to the goddess and Wui. The saintess had already tried. There's no need to try. The goddess shook her head. Wui also said, there's no need. There were some things that the result was obvious without trying. Even the 10 Directions' divine ancestor, the human king, and now Lin Tian couldn't fuse with it, so how could they fuse with it? Then, let's return to the immortal court. Lin Tian Andao. He took one last look at the 10th heaven, paused for a moment, and then returned to the immortal court with the goddess, the saintess, and Wu Yi. Time flew by, and 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. In the immortal court, Baiziki and a group of old friends came out of seclusion one after another. They refined the natural treasures Lin Tian had given them, and each of them made astonishing gains. It was also on this day that the immortal court displayed many precious fruits and wine, and the group gathered together again. Soon, a day passed and night fell. Then, the darkness of the night dispersed, and the morning sun rose over the horizon. On this day, Lin Tian found the goddess, the saintess, and Wui. I'm preparing to leave for the 10 Directions' divine realm. There were no more gods outside the 10 Directions' divine realm, and the 9 heavens were very peaceful. However, this peace was only temporary because the greatest source of disaster still existed, and that was the 10 Directions' divine realm. Chapter 2482. Go to the 10 divine domain? The goddess' eyes flickered. Are we leaving now? Yes. Lin Tian nodded. The 10 divine dominion was the 10th dimension. The saint spirit chi in it was much denser than in the 9th dimension, and there were many special ancient domains that he'd found in the 5th divine lord's consciousness. Now that he'd reached the level of heaven and earth sovereign, aside from the 10 ancestral gods, his father, and his master, there was basically no one who could be his opponent. Now that he'd ascended to the 10 divine dominion, he didn't need to worry about anything. He only needed to do his best to become stronger. He also believed that in an environment like the 10 divine domain, his strength would rise rapidly. Moreover, the 10 divine domain was where the heart of the 10th dimension belonged. A trip there might give him a lot of special insights that would allow him to successfully integrate the heart of the 10th dimension. As his strength continued to rise in the 10 divine domain, he might even gain new insights into reincarnation and reach the state of greater mastery. The goddess thought for a moment and didn't ask any more questions. She instructed, Go. Go alone. Pay attention to all aspects. There were at most 7 years until the return of the 10 ancestral gods, the heavenly emperor, and the human king. In these 7 years, Lin Tian had to do everything he could to become stronger. She knew this very well. Lin Tian had no opponents apart from the 10 ancestral gods, the heavenly emperor, and the human king. If she and the holy girls followed Lin Tian to the 10 divine domain, they could cultivate in peace. However, this process would more or less affect Lin Tian's cultivation speed and growth. If they followed him, Lin Tian would have to spend a lot of effort to protect them. Yes. Lin Tian nodded seriously. He naturally knew what his mother was thinking. On this day, he bid farewell to the goddess, the holy girls, and Wu Yi before leaving the 10 Directions ancient star. The ancestral god of 10 Directions was still around, so time was very precious to him. After leaving the 10 Directions ancient star, he quickly entered the 9th dimension and found a heaven and earth gate in the 9th dimension. This was the gate of heaven and earth that the ancestor devil and the others had opened to the 10 divine domains. For some reason, the gate of heaven and earth couldn't be smashed shut after the god's spirit lineage stepped out of the 10 divine domains. Even his father and master couldn't do it. They couldn't isolate the ancestor gods from the 10 divine domains by smashing the gate of heaven and earth. They could only enter the 10 divine domains to restrain the ancestor gods of this lineage and prevent them from stepping out of the 10 divine domains into the 9th dimension. Once the ancestor gods stepped out of the 10 divine domains, everything would be over. After entering the 10 Directions divine domain, his father had set up seals at both ends of the heaven and earth gates to prevent other gods from leaving. Apart from his father, the 10 Directions ancestral gods, and his master, no one else could break through the seals. He had learned all of this from the goddess. Naturally, he had also learned the technique to pass through the seal from the goddess. After all, it was still difficult for him to pass through the seals at both ends of the gate of heaven and earth with his current strength. When he arrived at the gate of heaven and earth, he formed a special hand seal and branded it onto the seal at the other end. He immediately passed through it. The interior of the gate of heaven and earth was filled with a dreamy mist. He walked through it and headed toward the 10 divine domains. After an unknown amount of time, he finally reached the end of the gate of heaven and earth. There was a seal in front of him that was intertwined with light. That damned celestial emperor! This seal. Damn it! When the ancestor gods return, we'll suppress him and make sure he dies a horrible death. A voice came from the other end of the seal, filled with chilling anger. When Lin Tian heard this voice from within the gate of heaven and earth, he also sensed the unique aura of the god's spirit lineage. I'm here! His eyes lit up. He didn't need to think to know that the 10 divine domains were right in front of him. Using a special magical technique, he stepped forward, passing through the seal left behind by his father, as if he were nothing more than air. In the blink of an eye, he stepped on solid ground again. Looking around, he saw a mountain range in his field of vision. It was not very tall, but every mountain was shrouded in a very thick mist. It was completely condensed from Saint Spirit Chi. Further away, he saw the flowing sacred river and the suspended waterfall. All of them were magnificent and surging with great momentum. In the air, the extremely dense Saint Spiritual Chi immediately rushed into his body on its own. This made his heart tremble. He had really arrived at the 10 divine domains. The density of the Saint Spiritual Chi in this world was just too shocking. Even a supreme being like him was reacting to the dense Saint Spiritual Chi. He couldn't help but feel extremely comfortable. A human? Did he come from the world below? Isn't the section below the gate of heaven and earth sealed as well? He passed through the seal here easily. Could this person be related to the celestial emperor? Exclamations rang out. There were a large number of gods standing nearby. Among them were 3 divine sovereigns, while the rest were in the 9th dimension. When they saw a human like Lin Tian suddenly step into their 10 divine regions through the gate of heaven and earth, their expressions changed. Then, their eyes lit up. He's definitely related to the celestial emperor. Take him down! The leader of the group, an ordinary divine emperor, said. As soon as he finished speaking, he moved. He raised his hand and grabbed Lin Tian. At the same time, the other deities in the area moved as well. The light in their eyes was extremely bright. Earlier, they'd witnessed how Lin Tian had passed through the seal of the door of heaven and earth in a simple and easy manner. He hadn't passed through it by force, and the seal wasn't damaged at all. Obviously, he possessed a special technique to pass through the seal here. In this way, so long as they were able to suppress Lin Tian and obtain the special technique to pass through such seals from Lin Tian's sea of consciousness, then they wouldn't have to wait for their universe-enlightened ancestral gods to return, and they would be able to step foot into the lower dimensions. For a moment there was a rumbling sound. Extremely intimidating holy light rolled out and sealed off the space around Lin Tian. The group of gods grabbed at Lin Tian and closed in on him in the blink of an eye. Lin Tian naturally saw these people. He didn't make any unnecessary movements. Only his majestic aura suddenly spread out. With a chi-chi-chi sound, the divine spirit holy light that was pressing down on them shattered completely. The group of divine spirits was sent flying from the impact. Even the three ordinary Sir Gods of Heaven and Earth's supreme level were no exception. Supreme of Heaven and Earth. You. When they looked at Lin Tian again, the group of divine spiritual worlds people were moved. Even the three ordinary Sir Gods who were leading the group were no exception. Lin Tian glanced at these people. He naturally knew why they attacked him. Since you call yourselves gods, why don't you have the benevolence that gods should have? Why must you smelt the lower realms? Why must you let countless living beings suffer? It's the ancestral god's order. One of the divine emperors said in a low voice. You do whatever your ancestral god tells you to do? Don't you have any opinions of your own? Lin Tian now asked. Have you never thought that your ancestral god's decision is wrong? Is it wrong? In fact, he had known for a long time that this group was acting under the ancestral god's orders. None of the gods had any thoughts of going against the ancestral god. However, he couldn't help but ask such a question at this time. Hearing this, the gods were furious. One of the divine emperors said coldly, The ancestral god is the one with the most hope to become the king. There can't be anything wrong. This person said, The living beings of the lower realms are too weak. There's no need for them to exist. We were born for the heavens and earth, so we are the most correct existence. We only need to exist. The lower realms should be integrated into our divine realms, making them stronger and making the gods of the future generations stronger. Are you really that weak? Can you defeat me, someone from the lower realms? Can you defeat the celestial arch and the human king? Lin Tian now. The divine emperor who spoke paused for a moment, then said coldly, We can't defeat the celestial arch and the human king, but we can't necessarily take you down. As he spoke, an extremely powerful god's aura emanated from his body. He shouted coldly, Form the eternal spirit formation. Beside him, the other gods all moved. One by one, the gods' aura outside their bodies became incomparably majestic. In the blink of an eye, everyone's aura was vast and mighty. They quickly merged together to form a huge god's formation. This formation combined the auras of the gods, instantly increasing the group's combat strength by 10 times. The ancestral god can't be wrong. The lower realms must be integrated into our divine realms and return together with the heart of the 10th dimension. The divine emperor who spoke said coldly. Together with the eternal spirit formation, it pressed down on Lin Tian mightily. Lin Tian shook his head. In the end, he couldn't persuade these gods. Now, he could see that the ancestral god of 10 directions was equivalent to the faith of these gods. His words were useless. The completed reincarnation diagram rushed out from behind him, intertwining with holiness and vastness. It majestically faced the group of gods. This time, he didn't show any mercy. The completed reincarnation diagram immediately annihilated all the holiness and enveloped all the gods in this place. One by one, they exploded, and even their divine souls were crushed together. The gods' blood floated above the void here. He paused here for a moment, then walked into the distance. Clang! The sword hummed and was extremely bright. It was mixed with an extremely frightening god's aura. In a flash, it slashed from afar. This sword was extremely frightening. Lin Tian's gaze couldn't help but waver slightly. He leaned to the side and moved more than 3 feet away. In the distant sky, a figure appeared. It was a middle-aged man. His eyes were extremely deep, and the aura around his body was extremely vast. Chapter 2483. Human. The third divine emperor glanced at the celestial emperor's gate of heaven and earth. He could tell at a glance that Lin Tian had walked out from it. Considering that all the gods here had been killed by Lin Tian, and the seal had not been broken, he instantly guessed that Lin Tian had a special way to pass through the seal. Tell me how to pass through the seal and I will spare your life. Do you think that's possible? Lin Tian was very calm. The third divine emperor's eyes were cold. He did not say anything after hearing Lin Tian's words. He raised his hand and a boundless aura of the gods immediately surged. The firmament trembled and, in the blink of an eye, a large amount of murderous light came crashing down. Lin Tian's expression changed. He quickly retreated and dodged all of the murderous light. The murderous light fell on an area far behind him. A group of celestial mountains there were immediately pulverized. As far as I know, you should not have such battle strength. He looked at the third divine emperor and said. A few months ago, he had learned everything about the lineage of gods from the fifth divine emperor's sea of consciousness. Among them, he had a rough idea of the fighting strength of the 10 divine emperors below the ancestral god of 10 directions. However, now that he had met the third divine emperor, his fighting strength was greatly different from the information he had obtained from the fifth divine emperor's sea of consciousness. At this moment he felt that the third divine emperor's battle strength was even stronger than the first divine emperor of this lineage who had already died. Search the seas of consciousness of other gods? The third divine emperor's eyes were cold. As time passes, I will naturally become stronger. As soon as he finished speaking, he moved again. With one step, the 10 directions movement swept the sky and the wind and clouds pressed down on Lin Tian. Lin Tian frowned. The third divine emperor's momentum was so strong that it greatly exceeded his expectations. It even made him feel a little pressured. However, even though he felt the pressure, his expression did not change. He did not retreat, but met the third divine emperor's attack head-on. Boom! When the two collided, the void in this place immediately collapsed. After all, both of them were supreme existences of heaven and earth, and extremely powerful ones at that. Therefore, even though the space of the 10 divine domain was extremely sturdy and far surpassed that of the 9-dimensional world, it was more or less fragile at this moment. In the blink of an eye, an hour passed. The two of them clashed. Fighting for hundreds of thousands of li, large amounts of mountain ranges collapsed. Human, you've surprised me. The third divine lord narrowed his eyes and looked at Lin Tian without blinking. I never thought that there would be someone as strong as you in the lower realm besides the Sky Emperor and the Human King. You surprised me too. Your power is 3 times stronger than the number 1 Sir God that I know of. Lin Tian now. The third divine emperor's eyes were deep and indifferent. The aura outside his body suddenly soared. I'll give you one more chance. Hand over the method to bypass the celestial emperor's seal and I'll spare your life. He looked at Lin Tian and said. Lin Tian raised his hand and directly slashed out a sword ray towards the other party. The third divine emperor's eyes turned cold as he smashed the sword light with his palm. I gave you a chance, but you didn't cherish it. As he said that, the aura on his body suddenly soared again. In the blink of an eye, it reached an extremely shocking level. For a moment, it was as if a saint energy volcano had erupted in this place. Moreover, at the same time, extremely dense fluctuations of laws surged out from the third divine lord's body. There were a total of 3 types. Solitary heaven, obscuring heaven, and breaking heaven. Lin Tian's eyes moved slightly. The 10 divine dominion, which was also the 10th dimension, had a total of 10 dimensional laws. They were sealing heaven, solitary heaven, obscuring heaven, breaking heaven, chaotic heaven, cutting path, cutting soul, cutting heart, and cutting origin. Each of these laws was extremely terrifying. Originally, among the 10 Sir Gods, as far as he knew, each of the 10 Sir Gods had mastered one of these 10-dimensional laws. Back then, the third divine lord had only mastered the solitary heaven law. He did not expect that even obscuring heaven and breaking heaven would be able to master them now. Moreover, the aura that the third Divine Lord was exuding at this time was clearly more terrifying than before. It was much, much stronger. This kind of aura actually made him feel threatened. Whoosh! The sound of the air being torn apart reverberated. In an instant, the third Divine Lord appeared in front of him and directly raised his hand to press down on him. The solitary heaven law, obscuring heaven law, and breaking heaven law coiled around each other, and the aura shook the world. Lin Tian immediately supported the sealing heaven law and cutting path law and faced the third Divine Lord's 10th dimension laws. The third Divine Lord's eyes moved slightly. Lin Tian had actually mastered 2 10th dimension laws. Human, you've surprised me once again. You actually know 2 of the supreme laws of my divine dominion, the third Divine Lord said. His aura shook violently and forced Lin Tian to retreat more than 10 feet. After that, his speed became even faster. He completely sealed the space around Lin Tian and grabbed at Lin Tian. This has surprised you even more. What's next? Lin Tian Andao. As he spoke, he steadied himself. 9 black moons appeared in his left eye, and reincarnation Dao patterns intertwined in his right eye. He opened his eye of destiny and Rinnegan at the same time, and clearly saw the third Divine Lord's movements. He found an opening and slapped out. With this slap, the third Divine Lord's divine brilliance law shattered. He was sent flying a few hundred feet away. Rinnegan! You've mastered reincarnation? The third Divine Lord steadied himself a few hundred feet away and looked at Lin Tian again. His eyes were filled with shock. A human had actually mastered reincarnation. How was this possible? Lin Tian didn't say anything. His eye of destiny shook slightly, and he used teleportation. In a flash, he appeared in front of the third Divine Lord. The third Divine Lord was shocked. You slap! Lin Tian grabbed the other party's face, interrupting his words. Holding the other party's face, he directly pressed the other party down into the void, pressing him onto the ground. The impact caused the ground to directly collapse, large cracks spreading out like spiderwebs. Damn it! The third Divine Lord roared angrily. His majestic aura was vast and mighty. He struggled free from Lin Tian's grip and moved a few thousand feet away. Lin Tian tilted his head and looked at the third Divine Lord. There was a strange light in his eyes. The third Divine Lord's strength was very different from the information he had obtained in the fifth Divine Lord's consciousness a few months ago. Now that he had opened his Rinnegan, he had used all his strength. He was at least 20 times stronger than the first Divine Lord of this lineage, who had already fallen. But now, the third Divine Lord was actually able to break free from his grip. Reincarnation! 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 The third Divine Lord opened his mouth, and his eyes were filled with greed. He stared at Lin Tian as if he was staring at his prey. Human, you're very good! This monarch wants you! I'm not interested in men, Lin Tiantan said coldly. He raised his hand and swung his sword. The speed of the sword was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it drew close to the third Divine Lord. There was a puff and blood splattered. The sword was too fast. The third Divine Lord couldn't avoid it, and was directly pierced through. Then, he took a step forward and appeared in front of the third Divine Lord. His Rinnegan moved slightly and he used the reincarnation purgatory illusion killing technique. However, in the next moment, his eyes narrowed. The third Divine Lord in front of him gradually disappeared like an illusion. It wasn't his real body. Human! I'll come for you again! You're mine! A cold laugh came from the southeast. Lin Tian tilted his head. In a flash, he traveled a few million miles and then stopped. There were traces of blood in the void. However, the third Divine Lord's aura had completely disappeared. This person. His eyes narrowed. He had opened his Rinnegan and could see through everything. However, the third Divine Lord had been able to escape from his Rinnegan. A gentle breeze swept through the air. He paused for a moment and closed his Rinnegan and Eye of Destiny at the same time. He stood there and looked at the center of the 10th divine territory. He paused for a moment, and then headed there. The 3rd divine lord's aura had completely disappeared. He couldn't be bothered to look for him. Now that he'd come to the 10th divine domain, his goal was to grow stronger and improve his strength, not to kill divine spirits. From the 5th divine lord's sea of consciousness, he'd learned that there was a divine spirit celestial palace in the center of the 10th divine territory. It was where the top gods of the divine spirit lineage resided. The 10 ancestral gods, the 10 divine lords, and the other gods who'd reached the 9th dimension all resided in the divine spirit celestial palace. There were many rare treasures there. He decided to go there and search for them. In another part of the 10th divine territory, in a treasure mountain. Reincarnation! The 3rd divine lord's chest was bleeding, but his eyes were burning with greed and excitement. I'm not his match yet. At the same time, I can't accommodate reincarnation. I have to continue growing stronger. I have to devour more. His eyes were filled with greed and excitement. Reincarnation is mine. It's all mine. The celestial emperor, the human king, the ancestral gods, you'll all be beneath my feet. I'll be the king. Crazy and cold words intertwined in this treasure mountain. The 3rd divine lord stepped into the distance and disappeared into the horizon. In the 10th divine territory, the sky was blue and the saint spirit chi was extremely dense. Lin Tian moved quickly from the place he'd been before. He was already far away. Then, he tore open several void portals and soon arrived at the center of the 10th divine territory. As far as the eye could see, there was an expanse of precious palaces in the sky. They were situated within the clouds, surrounded by immortal light. I'm here. A bright light flashed across Lin Tian's eyes. This was the divine spirit celestial palace. Only those who'd stepped into the 9th dimension were qualified to enter this place. He paused for a moment, then headed straight for the divine spirit celestial palace. In the blink of an eye, he was right in front of it. When he was close to the palace, he could feel that the saint spirit chi in the air was much denser than before. It was extremely shocking. He was shocked by this, but then he suddenly felt a little curious. This was the divine spirit celestial palace, the core area of the divine spirit celestial palace. Logically speaking, this place should be heavily guarded, and there should be many divine spirits here. However, when he arrived, the surroundings were very quiet. He didn't even see a single divine spirit guard outside the palace. He felt strange about this. After a pause, he continued to walk into the heavenly palace. Soon, he stepped into the heavenly palace. Chapter 2484. Inside the celestial palace, the saint power was even denser and boundless. However, there was blood everywhere, and many places were damaged. It was as if a great battle had taken place here, but there was not a single corpse here. What's going on? Lin Tian frowned. As far as he knew, there were only divine spirits in the 10 divine regions, and there were no other demonic beasts. There was only one clan in this world, and as far as he knew, there had never been any internal strife in this clan. Here, the core of the divine spirit lineage, the heavenly palace, was now broken and covered in blood. How could this be? What had happened? After a pause, he walked towards the center of the divine spirit heavenly palace. Wherever he went, most of the pavilions and immortal palaces in the divine spirit heavenly palace were broken, and there was a lot of blood everywhere. The smell of blood was very strong. Soon after, he walked through the entire divine spirit heavenly palace and found many ancient pavilions with hidden treasures and scriptures. However, they were all empty, all of the valuable items gone. It was as if they were robbed. This made him feel even more strange. Among the 10 divine emperors, the 3rd divine emperor was still alive, and he should have been guarding the divine spirit heavenly palace in the past. If the 3rd divine emperor was guarding it, why would it become like this? Could it be? He narrowed his eyes, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. Was this caused by the 3rd divine emperor? He had such a guess, and then he felt it was very likely. The third Divine Emperor's strength was too different from the information he found in the fifth Divine Emperor's Sea of Consciousness. Moreover, the third Divine Emperor must have known that this place had become like this. The possibility of him not knowing was basically zero. Previously, when the third Divine Emperor fought with him, he did not show any signs of worry. Obviously, he did not care about what had happened here. Therefore, the possibility of it being the third Divine Emperor was almost 100%. What does he want to do? He frowned. For a moment, he instinctively had a bad feeling. He didn't find anything of value after searching the entire palace. However, he decided to stay here and cultivate for the time being. This was because the place where the Divine Spirit Heavenly Palace was located had a terrifyingly dense Holy Spirit chi. It was naturally the best place to cultivate. Within the Heavenly Palace, he chose an ancient pavilion with the densest Holy Spirit chi and went into seclusion. The Reincarnation Heart Sutra activated on its own accord. For a time, billowing Saint Spirit chi surged within the Divine Spirit Celestial Palace. It almost turned into a liquid state within the Divine Spirit Celestial Palace, completely wrapping around him. For a time, his essence, energy, and spirit increased bit by bit. His cultivation base also gradually became stronger. There was no end to cultivation. Although supremacy of heaven and earth was the final realm in the path of cultivation, there was no limit to this realm. He had just stepped into this realm, so his cultivation could still continue to improve. Buzz! As he cultivated, strands of divine light interweaved on the surface of his body, making him look magnificent. At the same time, he spread out his divine thought of the origin and began to comprehend the other 10th dimensional laws apart from the seal the heavens and cut the way. Time flew by quickly. In the blink of an eye, half a year had passed. In half a year, he had completely mastered all the dimensional laws of the 10th dimensional heaven. Together with the 9th dimensional laws that he had previously mastered, they were all integrated into the 3-dimensional heaven and earth within his body, causing the 3-dimensional heaven and earth to undergo another great transformation. Naturally, his cultivation base had also increased by a lot. His combat strength was at least 10 times stronger than half a year ago. Boom! On this day, half a year later, a destructive light descended from the heavens and smashed the ancient pavilion that he was cultivating in. I came back to look for something. I didn't expect you to be here. You saved me the time of looking for you. A cold laugh rang out. The third Divine Emperor stood in the heavens, looking down at Lin Tian as he charged towards him. Lin Tian stood up. He was a little surprised by the third Divine Emperor's appearance, but he wasn't afraid at all. He flicked his finger. With a clang, a sharp sword ray shot up. Its speed was extremely fast as it pressed down on the third Divine Emperor. The third Divine Emperor raised his hand and smashed the sword ray with a slap. His majestic divine aura sealed the surroundings. Outside his body, a total of 6 10th dimensional laws intertwined. As time passes, I will continue to transcend. I will suppress everything, he said coldly. Hand over the samsara. The auras of the 6 10th dimensional laws surged violently. They were solitary heaven, heaven obscuring, heaven shattering, path cutting, and soul cutting. Lin Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. This person was much stronger than half a year ago. He had actually mastered 6 10th dimensional laws at the same time. You're a little strange, he said coldly. As his words fell, there was a boom. An extremely powerful might rushed out from his body and forcefully blasted away the third Divine Lord's 6 laws of the 10th dimension. The completed reincarnation diagram rushed out from behind him and pressed down on the third Divine Lord in a straight line. Moreover, the Eye of Destiny and the Eye of Reincarnation opened at the same time. He used all his strength, and used the Samsara River to envelop the third Divine Emperor. 10 10th dimensional laws were used at the same time and mercilessly slashed at the third Divine Emperor. You! The third Divine Emperor was moved. Compared to half a year ago, he was much stronger. He had mastered 6 10th dimensional laws. After sensing Lin Tian's aura, he felt that this time, he would be able to suppress Lin Tian. However, he did not expect Lin Tian to be much stronger than him. In just half a year, Lin Tian had mastered all the 10th dimensional laws. Moreover, his cultivation realm had obviously increased by a lot. With a shocked expression, he attacked again. He used all his strength to meet Lin Tian. However, it was useless. The technique he used was shattered by Lin Tian's saint energy laws in the blink of an eye. Bang! With a muffled sound, the third Divine Emperor was sent flying on the spot. Lin Tian closed in on the third Divine Emperor. His left eye of destiny and his right eye of reincarnation appeared mysterious and noble. He said coldly, "Were you the one who destroyed this heavenly palace? Did you kill all of the gods and spirits among them? What are you planning?" The third Divine Emperor's eyes moved slightly, and he revealed a sinister smile. "I am the ruler. I am the one who deserves to be called the Divine King." He laughed coldly and slapped his palm towards Lin Tian. His vast palm energy was like a vast ocean, mercilessly sweeping towards Lin Tian. Then, he did not stop. He turned around and left. Lin Tian shattered the third Divine Emperor's palm energy. His eye of destiny moved, and he used his teleportation ability to catch up with the third Divine Emperor. Clang! The sound of the sword was ear-piercing. The reincarnation sword rushed out from his body. He had not used this divine origin weapon in a long time. It immediately exploded with an extremely terrifying sword power. It completely sealed off the space within a radius of 10,000 feet. The sword slashed towards the third Divine Emperor. Pfft! Blood splattered. The third Divine Emperor exploded. However, he gradually dissipated before Lin Tian's eyes. "Reincarnation is mine! Remember, human!" A cold laugh came from afar. Lin Tian tilted his head. The three-dimensional power of the heavens and the earth also intertwined as he swung his sword in that direction. From afar, a muffled groan could be heard. Blood splattered and then quickly dissipated. Looking in that direction, Lin Tian frowned deeply. He felt that the third Divine Emperor was very strange. He gave him a very bad feeling. Therefore, just now, he had used all his strength. The three-dimensional power of the heavens and the earth, the reincarnation eye, and the reincarnation sword were all used. He wanted to kill the third Divine Emperor in the shortest time possible. However, the third Divine Emperor still managed to escape under such circumstances. He did not die under his sword. In the past half a year, the third Divine Emperor had become much stronger. The divine aura that he exuded was many times stronger than it had been half a year ago. It was as if there had been a huge qualitative change. If not for the huge change that had taken place in the past half a year, he might not have been the third Divine Emperor's match half a year ago. What is he doing? His heart froze. He looked in the direction that the third Divine Emperor had escaped. He wanted to chase after him. However, the third Divine Emperor's aura had completely disappeared. "The next time I see him, I have to kill him," he muttered to himself. The third Divine Emperor was somewhat strange and evil. He had a very bad feeling about him. Standing in the void, he paused for a moment and glanced at the Divine Spirit's celestial palace. He then left and walked into the distance. There were many special ancient regions in the Divine Spirit's celestial palace. The Saint Spiritual Chi there was not much weaker than the Divine Spirit's celestial palace. Moreover, there might be many ancient treasures and immortal treasures. He wanted to go to a few ancient regions in the divine domain one after another to increase his strength. His speed was very fast. After that, he quickly arrived at an ancient region called the Proud Sky Gorge. The Saint Spirit Chi inside was boundless, and there were various ancient divine plants. However, the air was filled with strands of white mist. The mist was very thick and carried a dangerous aura. Earth vein momentum. A faint light appeared in his eyes as he calmly walked in. In the 10 divine domain, there were no terrifying beasts in the ancient regions of this world. They were all famous because of the special earth vein momentum. Coincidentally, the dragon burial scripture and the law of earth he controlled could effectively counter all kinds of earth vein momentum. Therefore, he was not afraid of these ancient regions at all. He stepped into the proud sky gorge and found some special immortal treasures. He directly refined them. A month later, he stepped into the proud sky gorge and then walked to the other ancient regions. In the blink of an eye, a full year passed. In a year, he had walked through most of the ancient regions of the 10 divine domains. His cultivation base and battle prowess had increased greatly. Ah! A scream rang out, coming from a saint mountain not far away. Lin Tian's eyes narrowed. It was not because of the scream, but because he felt a familiar aura there. Immediately, he stepped forward. In an instant, he was very far away and appeared in the saint mountain. In front of him, thick saint light interweaved. A god in the 9th dimension was enveloped by endless saint light with a face full of shock and fear. He was forcibly merged into the body of a god in black. His aura disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Devouring your own kind? Is this how you become stronger? Lin Tian said coldly as he looked at the god in black. Chapter 2485. As Lin Tian discovered the third Divine Lord, the third Divine Lord naturally discovered Lin Tian as well. Human! You have finally appeared again! With a cold smile, the third Divine Lord immediately attacked. Dense divine light swept toward Lin Tian. Lin Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. His opponent's aura was actually weaker than it was a year ago. Without any unnecessary words, he opened his Rinnegan and suppressed the third Divine Lord in an instant. The third Divine Lord's eyes moved slightly. There was a trace of surprise, but more than that, there was still a cold light. You have become stronger again! Lin Tian's Rinnegan moved, causing the third Divine Lord to tremble immediately. He directly used his Rinnegan to search his consciousness. However, in the next moment, with a poof, the third Divine Lord suddenly exploded. Human, I am everywhere now. No one can kill me! Soon I will take you down! The cold voice sounded from all directions. Lin Tian frowned. With a slight movement of his mind, the light of reincarnation swept across all directions. In the blink of an eye, with him as the center, dozens of blood mists exploded within a radius of 10,000 feet. All of them were the third Divine Lord. They are all avatars. Now, his strength was at least 1,000 times stronger than it was a year ago. When he opened his Rinnegan, within a radius of 10,000 feet, he killed dozens of the third Divine Lord in the blink of an eye. However, he discovered that these were not the third Divine Lord's original body. This made him finally understand why he felt that the third Divine Lord's aura was weaker than before. It turned out that these were not the third Divine Lord's original body. At the same time, this made him frown. Why did the third Divine Lord have so many avatars? Split into countless avatars, devour gods one by one, and then gather all the avatars and merge them together? He guessed in his heart. With such a guess, the bad feeling in his heart grew stronger. This third Divine Lord was indeed a little dangerous. The third Divine Lord's ambition was probably greater than that of the 10 ancestral gods. A cold light appeared in his eyes. He left this place. His Rinnegan remained open as he began to chase after the third Divine Lord. Soon, he walked far away. His majestic divine consciousness spread out. In an ancient mountain, he saw another avatar of the third Divine Lord devouring a god in the tribulation realm. Clang! The sword light materialized beside him and silently arrived in front of the third Divine Lord's incarnation. With a poof, it shattered the incarnation. Blood splattered everywhere. The tribulation realm god managed to keep his life, but he was still trembling. He then looked at Lin Tian and trembled again. Human Rinnegan, you! At this moment, as he looked at Lin Tian, the eyes of this tribulation realm immortal were filled with shock. Then, after he had saved his life from the hands of the third Divine Sovereign, his eyes were filled with fear. He knew that the Divine Spirit clan had become the common enemy of the 10 divine realms under the ancestral gods' orders. How could he not be terrified when he saw a human who possessed the Rinnegan standing in front of him in the 10 divine realms? Lin Tian glanced at this deity and did not say anything. He turned around and left. All of them were following the orders of the ancestral god of 10 directions. The root of the calamity was the ancestral god of 10 directions, so the only thing they had to deal with was the ancestral god of 10 directions. Of course, with the addition of the third divine lord, the other party made him feel threatened. As for the other gods, as long as they didn't take the initiative to attack him, he wouldn't kill them. Soon, he left this place and stepped through one region after another in the 10 divine regions. He found the incarnations of the third divine lord one after another. Whenever he encountered them, he killed them without mercy. In just half a month, he had killed more than 100 of the third divine lord's incarnations in the 10 divine regions. How many have I divided? He frowned. In half a month, he had killed more than 100 of the third divine lord's incarnations. During the process, he had tried to search for the third divine lord's sea of consciousness, but he had failed. Regardless of whether he searched with his consciousness or forcibly used the Rinnegan, it was useless. Any incarnation that came into contact with the third divine lord's sea of consciousness would self-destruct. This made him very clear that the third divine lord had planted restrictions like the fragmentary divine runes in all of his incarnations. Whenever someone tried to pry into the third divine lord's sea of consciousness or induce the incarnation to reveal anything important, the restriction would be triggered instantly. "Let's see how many incarnations you can divide into," he said coldly. He traveled to every corner of the 10 divine regions, cultivating, comprehending reincarnation, and hunting down the third divine lord. Time continued to pass. With his boundless consciousness, he constantly found the third divine lord's incarnations and killed them. Soon, another year had passed. In the past year, he had killed thousands of the third Sir God's incarnations. Naturally, his cultivation level had become even stronger. Compared to a year ago, it had increased by a lot. As for reincarnation, he had not gained anything. He was clearly just a step away from mastering it. It was as if he could take the next step, but he could not do it. "Damn human!" The third divine lord gritted his teeth in the dark underground of an extremely ordinary ancient mountain. In the past year, thousands of his incarnations had been destroyed at the hands of Lin Tian. These incarnations were all his power. He could not believe it. He was continuously devouring godly spirits. His potential, source, power, and all other aspects were increasing at a tremendous speed. However, based on the feeling of the incarnation, Lin Tian's increase in power was still greater than his. There was a strong murderous intent in his eyes. He could not figure out how Lin Tian could become so strong in such a short period of time. However, this murderous intent quickly turned into a chilling coldness. "My incarnations are all over the divine regions. There is no end to them. You can't kill them all. I have all the time in the world. Take it slow. In the end, everything will belong to me. I am the king." His cold voice intertwined underground. The third divine lord closed his eyes and sank into cultivation in the dark underground. Lin Tian traveled through the 10 divine regions, stepping through one region after another. He cultivated and chased after the third divine lord. Time passed extremely quickly. In the blink of an eye, 5 years had passed. In these 5 years, he had killed over 10,000 of the third divine lord's incarnations. His cultivation had also improved tremendously. After all, with his soul roots fully awakened, his path of cultivation was too smooth. Under serious cultivation, his strength could be said to have increased by leaps and bounds. Now, he was far from what he was 5 years ago, and had undergone a huge qualitative change. The only thing that had not changed was his control of the Tao of reincarnation. Compared to 5 years ago, he still did not make any progress. He was only a hair's breadth away from mastering it. However, that hair's breadth was like the gap between heaven and earth. It seemed like he would never be able to reach it. He stepped onto the surface of the 10 divine regions and looked into the distance. "The current me should be able to buzz!" All of a sudden, the entire 10 directions divine regions trembled, interrupting his mutterings. Gusts of wind swept up, gradually becoming stronger and stronger. Moreover, the divine regions began to tremble. It was as if a world-ending earthquake was about to happen, or as if a peerless beast was about to awaken. Lin Tian's expression changed. The black hair in front of his forehead fluttered in the wind generated by the 10 divine regions. His eyes instantly became extremely deep and bright. 2 familiar auras seemed to have come from the eternal unknown. They were approaching at an unimaginable speed. Time fluctuated violently. They're here! He looked up at the sky. With a rumble, the space collapsed. A vast river of time appeared, and 2 figures emerged from it. One was a handsome middle-aged man in a white robe. He looked like an immortal from beyond the heavens. The other was a young man with a slender body and deep eyes. He looked like an immortal prime sovereign. Master! Lin Tian was excited. He instantly stepped into the river of time in the sky and arrived in front of the middle-aged man. This was an old drunkard, also the human king. He was Lin Tian's master. Seeing him again after so many years, Lin Tian's eyes were filled with joy. An old drunkard smiled faintly. He was elegant and handsome. He reached out and rubbed Lin Tian's head. Very good. You've become very powerful. He seemed to have known that Lin Tian was in the 10 divine regions a long time ago. He was not surprised to see Lin Tian now. Lin Tian scratched his head, then looked at the young man beside him. He was a little reserved. Father! He had seen the Sky Emperor once before, but that was only a consciousness clone. Now, this was the first time he had seen his father in person. The Heavenly Emperor had a gentle expression on his face. Like an old drunkard, he rubbed Lin Tian's head and smiled warmly. Very good. He only said these 2 words, but they were filled with love and, at the same time, a trace of pride. He could sense that Lin Tian's aura was very powerful. Rumble! Suddenly, the river of time trembled and rippled. Heavenly Emperor, Human King, very good! A cold voice sounded. A tall figure stepped out of the river of time. There were 10 halos behind him, and his eyes were so deep that they seemed to contain countless stars. The entire 10 divine regions was shaken by his appearance. With a hiss, the river of time shattered. Lin Tian's eyes narrowed as his gaze fell on the figure. The ancestral god of 10 directions! He had once searched the 5th divine lord's sea of consciousness, so he naturally knew what the ancestral god of 10 directions looked like. On this day, his father and master had appeared from the river of time. They had returned from the past and could no longer contain the ancestral god of 10 directions. The ancestral god of 10 directions had returned with them. This was the first time he had truly seen the ancestral god of 10 directions, and the first time he had felt his aura up close. That aura was too terrifying. It felt as if the ancestral god of 10 directions was a world unto itself. Everything in the world seemed as insignificant as dust in front of him. The Heavenly Emperor and an old drunkard tilted their heads and looked at the ancestral god of 10 directions. Their gazes were deep but calm. The power of the 10 dimensions, the 10 directions heaven, the ancient and endless eras. You are qualified to travel with me. The ancestral god of 10 directions' gaze fell on the Heavenly Emperor and an old drunkard. I'll give you one last chance. Submit to me and become gods. At this moment, he saw Lin Tian, but he didn't care about Lin Tian in the slightest. In his eyes, there was only the Heavenly Emperor and an old drunkard. The Heavenly Emperor was calm. An old drunkard smiled faintly and still didn't say a word. What a pity! The ancestral god of 10 directions said indifferently. The river of time can no longer be reversed. You can no longer stop me. Chapter 2486. The sky darkened, and thunder rumbled. The entire 10 divine realms trembled. For a moment, countless gods in the vast 10 divine realms were shaken. Ancestral God's aura! He's back! The ancestral god is back! Many gods were surprised and overjoyed as they rushed toward the ancestral god. At the same time, at the bottom of an ordinary ancient mountain, the 3rd divine lord was moved. He's back! His eyes were gloomy. It's time for me to move! Just wait and see. Everything is mine! Boom! Saint energy filled the sky, shaking the entire world. The ancestral god of 10 directions stood in the sky as if he was the lord of all things. Endless power of law surrounded his body, and his aura shook the sky. Lin Tian was shocked. The ancestral god of 10 directions was too powerful. Although he had already found out about his strength in the 5th Divine Lord's Sea of Consciousness, he still couldn't help but be shocked when he faced him in person. He was too terrifying. "If you don't submit, then die," the ancestral god of 10 directions said coldly. As his words fell, endless thunder rumbled in the sky. In the next moment, it rained down on the celestial arch and the human king. The celestial emperor's eyes were deep and calm. Countless emperor's seals surrounded his body, and frightening laws interweaved to meet the lightning bolts falling from the sky. The lightning bolts were crushed immediately, and the laws of the emperor's seals pressed down on the 10 ancestral gods. Silent sky, sky obscuring sky, sky shattering sky, sky sealing sky, sky chaotic sky, cutting Tao, cutting soul, cutting heart, and cutting origin. Lin Tian was shocked. His father had also mastered all the laws of the 10th dimension. The imperial seals in the sky, combined with the 10 laws of the 10th dimension, pressed down on the ancestral god of 10 directions in the blink of an eye, annihilating the space in all directions. The ancestral god of 10 directions was as still as a mountain. Only the light of his divine spirit spread out, and shattered everything with a hiss. "You've become stronger, celestial Darch." His voice was cold. As soon as he said that, thunder and lightning fell from the sky again. This time, it was stronger and more shocking than before. The old drunkard flicked his finger, and with the point of his finger, all directions trembled. The fluctuations of 10 types of laws of the 10th dimension were mixed within as they pierced through everything. Lin Tian was shocked. His master had also mastered all the laws of the 10th dimension. "You've become stronger." Ancestral God Shifang's eyes were indifferent. As soon as the words left his mouth, a boom could be heard, and the space around him instantly became oppressive. Waves of godly spirits began to surge. The Sky Emperor narrowed his eyes, and so did an old drunkard. Both of them exuded an aura as vast as a galaxy. "You are very powerful, extremely powerful. However, you can't stop me," Ancestral God Shifu said coldly. In the next moment, he moved, bringing with him an endless wave of divinity that swept toward the Celestial Arch and an old drunkard. The Celestial Arch summoned countless imperial seals and stepped forward to meet his opponent head-on. An old drunkard moved as well. With one step, the mountains and rivers moved. Endless precepts mixed into a sky full of saint energy sword waves. An intense collision erupted in this place. Each of the 3 individuals was an existence that could penetrate the heavens and penetrate the earth. They disrupted time and shattered space. However, in comparison, the ancestral god Shifang was still much stronger. Even though the Celestial Arch and an old drunkard were invincible in the 9th dimension and struck fear into the hearts of the other gods, they were still at an absolute disadvantage when facing the ancestral god Shifang head-on. Lin Tian stood in the distance, his eyes gleaming as he watched his father and teacher fight the ancestral god Shifang. He was shocked by the strength of the two and the terror of the ancestral god Shifang. At the same time, the blood in his body began to boil. Boom! A vast and boundless aura spread out from his body. The Eye of Destiny and Reincarnation opened at the same time. The Reincarnation Forging Divine Technique was activated together, increasing his combat strength by 20 times. Then, the Undying Precepts also vibrated. Boundless Light of Destiny and Reincarnation Light immediately intertwined in this space, forming a vortex of destiny and reincarnation. In the next moment, the Eye of Destiny trembled slightly, and the ability to teleport was activated. In an instant, he appeared behind the ancestral god Shifang. Together with the Reincarnation Eyes, the vast and boundless Reincarnation Light gathered at the tip of his fist. He punched toward the ancestral god Shifang, causing the endless void to collapse. The ancestral god Shifang tilted his head, and a glint flashed across his eyes. Reincarnation! Ever since he stepped into the past, he had seen Lin Tian from the very beginning. However, he did not pay much attention to Lin Tian. His attention was only on the Heavenly Emperor and an old drunkard. However, he did not expect Lin Tian, whom he did not pay attention to at all, to be able to control reincarnation. That kind of power was something that even he could not control. Dong! Lin Tian's punch shook the entire area. In the next moment, it landed in front of the ancestral god Shifang. It was extremely fast and powerful. The reincarnation light filled the sky and drowned everything. The ancestral god Shifang raised his hand and instantly grabbed Lin Tian's fist. The glint in his eyes became even brighter, deeper, and colder. You are not much weaker than the Heavenly Emperor and the Human King. Can a human's potential and body withstand reincarnation? He grabbed Lin Tian's fist with one hand. Boundless divine light surged and enveloped Lin Tian from all directions. Lin Tian's expression changed. His left eye of destiny vibrated slightly and instantly disappeared. He then appeared in front of the Heavenly Emperor and an old drunkard. At the same time, his right eye of reincarnation moved slightly. The heavenly river of reincarnation and the blood sea of reincarnation swept out together. They descended from the sky and drowned the ancestral god Shifang. This time, the heavenly river of reincarnation and the blood sea of reincarnation did indeed suppress the other party. However, in the next moment, his expression changed slightly. The heavenly river of reincarnation and the blood sea of reincarnation collapsed, revealing the ancestral god Shifang. He was not injured at all. An incomplete reincarnation is useless and meaningless. The ancestral god Shifang's eyes were deep. As he spoke, his eyes became even more profound. He stared at Lin Tian without blinking. Boom! Boundless divine light resonated with each other. He took a step forward and closed in on Lin Tian. An incomplete reincarnation was meaningless. However, to be able to control reincarnation, even if it was just a little, was enough to show that he was extremely terrifying. At this moment, compared to the Heavenly Emperor and an old drunkard, he was more concerned about Lin Tian. Outside the Heavenly Emperor's body, boundless imperial seals trembled. 10 types of 10th-dimensional laws intertwined once again and pressed down mightily. An old drunkard attacked together with the Heavenly Emperor. He also activated 10 types of 10th-dimensional laws and attacked the other party together with the Heavenly Emperor. Lin Tian naturally attacked together with them. The light of destiny and the light of reincarnation flared. At the same time, there was a clang. The sound of a sword was ear-piercing. The reincarnation sword slashed out of his body. He used it to perform the reincarnation sword technique. This was his one and only original divine weapon. He had been refining it until now. After being continuously baptized by lightning and the power of faith, it was now extremely powerful. As he activated the reincarnation sword technique, it instantly shook and filled the sky with sharp killing swords. Boom! 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 Surging saint energy surged, shaking the surroundings. He, the Heavenly Emperor, and an old drunkard fought together against the 10 ancestral gods. The sky collapsed as they fought. Not long after, whoosh 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 sounds could be heard. One after another, gods rushed over from various regions of the 10 divine realm. Ancestral gods. The gods were all excited and pleasantly surprised when they saw the ancestral gods from afar. After such a long time, their ancestral gods had finally returned. At the same time, the gods also saw the Heavenly Emperor and Human King. They all had fear and coldness in their eyes. Back then, it was these two people who restrained their ancestral gods. Otherwise, they would have already melted the 9 worlds below into the 10 divine realm. The heart of the 10th dimension would have also returned long ago. At the same time, some gods also saw Lin Tian. Then, they saw Lin Tian's Rinnegan and the light of reincarnation intertwined around Lin Tian's body. For a moment, their expressions changed drastically. Reincarnation! This human! The gods were all shocked. A human actually controlled reincarnation. Rumble! The sky trembled, and Saint Light rumbled. Lin Tian cooperated with Heavenly Monarch and Human King. Their battle intent soared to the sky as they attacked the 10 ancestral gods from different directions. Very good. Very good, the ancestral god said coldly. He was surrounded by 3 supreme experts, but he didn't seem to be affected at all. Outside his body, the divine light shook and turned into a terrifying wave that swept out, blasting Lin Tian and the other 2 away. Lin Tian's expression was solemn. He had fully awakened his soul root. In the environment of the 10 divine realm, he had cultivated seriously for several years, and used the reincarnation forging divine art and the law of indestructibility to increase his strength. Now, he was no weaker than his father and teacher. However, he was still no match for the ancestral god with his father and teacher. Most importantly, the 10 ancestral gods were only casually attacking, and they were far from using their full strength. Monster! He gritted his teeth. Monster? You, who control reincarnation, are normal? The ancestral god's eyes were indifferent, and there was no change in his expression. With a loud rumble, the divine light behind him turned into a monstrous wave that pressed down on Lin Tian in a mighty manner. At the same time, it also enveloped the heavenly emperor and human king. This momentum was too shocking. Lin Tian, the heavenly emperor, and an old drunkard attacked together, but they were forced back again. Lord Ancestral God is invincible. A mere human dares to defy us and the ancestral god? You think too highly of yourself. In the distance, the group of gods watched this scene with eyes brimming with reverence and respect for the ancestral god of 10 directions. The ancestral god was tall, and behind him were 10 divine halos that shone brightly. How long can you last? He looked at Lin Tian and the other 2, and his voice was calm and indifferent, as if he was the master of heaven and earth. The heavenly emperor didn't say anything. He formed a seal with one hand, and a divine diagram with countless imperial seals formed above his head. Behind an old drunkard, a huge light shadow formed. It was dreamy and illusory, and it seemed like it could crush everything with a single blow. Behind Lin Tian, a 3-dimensional heaven and earth appeared. The surging power of heaven and earth was vast and mighty, and the void in all directions was distorted inch by inch. 3 terrifying waves of energy spread out, causing the ordinary gods in the distance to tremble and involuntarily retreat. Very good. Not bad, the ancestral god said indifferently. As soon as he finished speaking, the divine light outside his body became a little stronger. It turned into 3 monstrous waves that swept toward the 3 of them. Above the heavenly emperor's head, the heavenly emperor diagram spun upward and cut everything apart. An old drunkard merged with the huge light shadow behind him. The huge light shadow moved with him, and its fist shattered everything. Chapter 2487. The sharp sword radiance destroyed everything, the celestial darch diagram suppressed everything, and an old drunkard's human sovereign divine shadow flattened everything. Such an imposing aura was shocking to the extreme, and it caused all the ordinary gods to feel terrified. It was too powerful. However, this was nothing to the ancestral gods of the 10 Directions continent. Not bad. After saying that, the ancestral god of 10 Directions raised his hand, and a bright light spread out. The fierce battle only lasted for a moment. Lin Tian, the celestial darch, and an old drunkard were all knocked back at the same time. The sword radiance shattered, the celestial darch diagram cracked, and the human sovereign divine shadow also cracked and disappeared. Specks of blood splattered in the void, forming a bright red color. Lin Tian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and frowned deeply. The ancestral god of 10 Directions was too powerful. They were no match for him. The ancestral god of 10 Directions looked at Lin Tian and the other 2 and did not continue to attack. He was like an emperor looking at his subjects. With your strength, why are you risking your lives for a group of irrelevant people? Is there any meaning to it? He said. There is no end to cultivation. Submit to me and refine everything in the world. We can step into a higher dimension. If you are willing to submit, I can take in your family and friends. Every life has a meaning to it. Using the lives of all living beings in exchange for power is too dark, the celestial darch said. A general success is built on the bones of thousands. To open up a further path of cultivation, there must be sacrifices. Is this called darkness? The ancestral god of 10 directions looked at the celestial arch. A man like you can't even understand this simple logic? I don't understand. The celestial arch said calmly. The ancestral god of 10 directions shook his head with disappointment. He looked at the human sovereign. Human sovereign. I don't understand. The human sovereign smiled. What about you? The ancestral god of 10 directions looked at Lin Tian. I don't understand. Lin Tian Andao. Stepping on the lives of innocent living beings to achieve his goals. Was this not darkness? Was it not darkness? The disappointment in the ancestral god of 10 directions' eyes deepened. Then, his eyes turned cold. From now on, I won't give you any more chances, he said coldly. With a hong sound, roiling waves of deities surged. He took a step forward, his aura alone blasting the 3 of them aside. Thunder exploded in the sky. Boundless thunder and lightning intertwined, turning into a thunderstorm that pressed down mightily. The boundless thunderstorm enveloped Lin Tian, the celestial arch, and an old drunkard at the same time. Lin Tian condensed the sword of heaven and earth using the 3 dimensions of heaven and earth. With a swing of the sword, it slashed across the sky. Clang! The sword chime was ear-piercing, shaking the surroundings. Behind the Heavenly Emperor, the diagram of the Heavenly Emperor appeared again, suppressing the surroundings. Behind an old drunkard, the human sovereign's divine shadow appeared once again, wrapping around him and moving along with him. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the 4 of them collided. In this region, the sky was continuously destroyed, collapsing, and being annihilated. Ancient annihilation. Suddenly, 4 indifferent words came out. The Heavenly Emperor made a seal with both hands for the first time, and an extremely terrifying aura suddenly intertwined, as if it could destroy the world. Invisible waves immediately fell in front of the 10 ancestral gods. Bang! There was a muffled sound. For the first time, the 10 ancestral gods were sent flying, and the void behind them instantly collapsed. Drops of golden blood splattered in the void. Lord Ancestral God! How is this possible? The group of ordinary gods had already retreated far away. At this moment, seeing this scene, all of their expressions changed. Their ancestral gods, an invincible existence, were now injured by someone. Lin Tian's expression changed as well. Before this, the 3 of them hadn't been able to injure the ancestral god in the slightest. But now, his father had actually injured the ancestral god all of a sudden, and sent him flying. Just now, he was shocked. Just now, the technique that his father had used clearly had the fluctuation of laws, but it did not match any of the laws that he knew of. It did not belong to any dimensional laws that he knew of. However, the power of that law was extremely terrifying. It was obviously many times more terrifying than any of the 10th dimensional laws. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. Golden blood dripped in the air. The 10 ancestral gods steadied themselves and looked at the blood in the air. Their eyes darkened. Surpassing the inherent laws of heaven and earth. Is this a self-created law that you created? He looked coldly at the celestial arch. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a rumble. The divine radiance around his body became even more intense, and his aura became even more terrifying. Boundless waves suppressed everything in the world. The light of destruction suppressed everything in the world. Illusory void flower. An old drunkard spoke. As soon as these 4 words came out, endless hazy radiance appeared between heaven and earth and melted everything in the blink of an eye. It was as if endless hazy illusions were flickering between heaven and earth. Invisible waves of air spread out and landed on the 10 ancestral gods. Poof! Blood splattered everywhere. The 10 ancestral gods retreated 30 feet away, and a bloody hole appeared in their chests. It was a shocking sight. This scene caused the group of ordinary gods in the distance to tremble violently again. How? Their ancestor god of 10 directions was injured again, and even his chest was pierced through. The 10 ancestral gods lowered their heads and looked at the bloody hole in their chests. Then, they raised their heads and looked at an old drunkard. You have also created your own law. The bloody hole in their chests healed quickly. They looked at an old drunkard and then at the celestial arch. You have indeed created your own law. After being silent for countless years in the river of time, he actually managed to silently reach this step. With a rumble, the divine radiance around his body became even stronger. His eyes shone brightly as he pressed down on the celestial arch and an old drunkard. Ancient destruction! Illusory void flower! The celestial arch and an old drunkard attacked at the same time. Special laws surrounded them, and their terrifying auras shook and shattered everything. Boom! 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 Terrifying saint energy surged. The three of them fought fiercely and destroyed everything. Lin Tian's eyes couldn't help but ripple. For a moment, he couldn't help but be stunned. His eyes flickered violently. At this moment, as he watched the battle between his father and his master, the fluctuations of the laws that intertwined outside their bodies were too shocking and terrifying. With his soul root that had been completely unsealed, he seriously observed and discovered that he couldn't control the laws outside their bodies no matter what. It was just like the reincarnation forging divine art and reincarnation calamity crossing song that Wu Yi had created for him. Only he and Wu Yi, who possessed the origin of reincarnation, could use them. No one else, no matter what, could do it. Created by combining their origin? Their own law? This? His heart trembled. Just how strong were his father and master? They had created their own law outside of all dimensional laws. He estimated that among the known dimensional laws in the world, only a complete reincarnation could suppress such a law. At this moment, his father and master were fighting the 10 ancestral gods to a draw. They weren't at a disadvantage at all. How is this possible? That was impossible! How is this possible? In the distance, the ordinary gods were in disbelief. Boom! 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 Intense confrontations and frightening laws were everywhere in this place. The heavenly emperor's sacrifice to ancient extinction, an old drunkard's illusion flower, and the boundless divine light of the 10 ancestral gods had completely lost the overwhelming advantage they had at the beginning. Under these two laws, they no longer had the upper hand. Lin Tian watched from afar. At this moment, he didn't even make a move. Originally, he thought that he should be as strong as his father and master, but he didn't expect that in the end, he was still wrong. Over the years, he had been constantly improving. In the long river of time, in the past era, his father and master had also improved. They had actually created their own laws, which were even more terrifying than the 10-dimensional laws. Boom! The aura of the laws was frightening, and the divine light was vast. The two collided, shaking the wastelands and collapsing the void. Very good! The 10 ancestral gods still said these two words indifferently. As his words fell, the first of the 10 divine halos behind him trembled slightly. In an instant, there was a rumble, and the mountains and rivers lost their color. An extremely frightening law aura spread out like a volcanic eruption. With another rumble, the heavenly emperor's eternal extinction and an old drunkard's illusion flower were both annihilated. Bang! Bang! Two muffled sounds rang out. The heavenly emperor and an old drunkard were both knocked back at the same time, and blood splashed out. Father! Master! Lin Tian hurriedly went to greet him. It's fine, the heavenly emperor said. An old drunkard wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked at the 10 ancestral gods with a smile. Or should I say, as expected of the strongest god. I'm the chief god, the first to be born in the 10 divine realms. I was born by the will of heaven and earth, the 10 ancestral gods said indifferently. Born by the will of heaven and earth. An old drunkard smiled. If that's the case, why didn't the heart of the 10 dimensions acknowledge you? The 10 ancestral gods' eyes were cold. Everything needs time. One day, I'll be king. As his words fell, the first divine halos behind him trembled again, and law fluctuations filled the sky. Lin Tian was moved. Previously, he was a little concerned about the 10 divine halos behind the 10 ancestral gods. He couldn't see through them previously, but now, after the first divine halos trembled twice, he finally understood. The 10 ancestral gods, the strongest ancestral gods of the god's spirit lineage, had also created their own laws. Moreover, there were 10 of them, and they formed a law divine halos behind him. This made him feel the terror of the 10 ancestral gods once again. They had actually created 10 of their own laws. Boom! The surging law immediately rushed over, enveloping him, the Heavenly Emperor, and an old drunkard at the same time. The Heavenly Emperor moved, and the eternal extinction law was pushed to the limit as he faced the attack. An old drunkard shook his hand seal, and the illusory void flower appeared, facing the other party head-on. Lin Tian attacked again at this time, and the three-dimensional world was pushed to the limit. Moreover, all the dimensional laws that he had mastered were released at this time, and all of them were intertwined on his reincarnation sword, and he slashed out fiercely. Boom! The strongest combat power of the three merged together, turning into a destructive storm that met the 10 ancestral gods' laws. God descends to heaven and earth, the 10 ancestral gods said coldly, and the second divine halos behind him trembled. Chapter 2488. The fluctuations of the laws were frightening. Lin Tian, the Sky Emperor, and an old drunkard were all shaken. Without any hesitation, the three of them retreated at the same time, each casting a powerful technique to meet the ancestor god's laws head-on. Rumble! With a loud boom, the space of the 10 directions collapsed, and large cracks appeared one after another. Lin Tian, the Sky Emperor, and an old drunkard were all pushed back, and their faces paled slightly. This is only his second law. There are 8 more after that, each stronger than the last, an old drunkard said. The old drunkard said. He was clearly at a disadvantage, but there was a smile on his face. Lin Tian knew that an old drunkard didn't have any follow-up moves that could absolutely suppress the ancestor gods. Instead, it was just his personality. Other than when Master's wife's reincarnation soul had died, he was always so calm and collected no matter what the situation was. We must stop him in this divine domain, the Sky Emperor said. Once the ancestor gods stepped out of the 10 directions divine domain, it would undoubtedly be a disaster for the few realms below. The two of them stood together, their gazes calm. The aura around their bodies had already been pushed to the peak before, but now, it gradually began to rise again, becoming stronger little by little. Compared to us, your potential is limitless. In this battle, you're weaker than us now, but as long as you're willing and have a firm belief, you'll definitely be able to catch up and surpass us in the shortest time possible, an old drunkard said. Lin Tian's expression changed. He knew that an old drunkard's words were directed at him. Yes, Master, he said seriously. The eye of destiny and the eye of reincarnation vibrated at the same time, an endless light of providence and reincarnation surrounded him. His aura, which had already reached its peak, grew stronger bit by bit, just like an old drunkard and the Sky Emperor. The ancestor gods didn't take the opportunity to attack. 10 divine halos revolved behind him as he looked at an old drunkard, the Sky Emperor, and Lin Tian. Strands of light intertwined in his deep and indifferent eyes. Compared to us gods, you humans are really weak. However, with your weak bodies, you've continuously surpassed us, created your own laws, improved infinitely, and controlled reincarnation. You're not weak humans, you're more like gods than many gods. I really don't want to kill you. It would be a pity. I take back my previous words. I'll give you one more chance. Submit to me and follow me to break through the fog of cultivation and step into a higher dimension. I'm still willing to accept your family and friends. He looked at the three of them. In the distance, the gods, their ancestor gods, an invincible existence, had invited 3 human cultivators from the lower worlds time and time again. You've opened up the path ahead and stepped into a higher dimension. You've sacrificed thousands of lives as a foundation. It's hard to accept. The Sky Emperor shook his head. Our paths are different. an old drunkard said. Lin Tian didn't say anything. He couldn't accept the ancestor god's words. The ancestor gods looked disappointed, but in the next moment, his eyes became cold again. Stubborn! With a boom, a vast aura of laws surged. Behind him, the first and second divine halos vibrated at the same time. Two terrifying waves of laws intertwined and pressed toward Lin Tian, the Sky Emperor, and an old drunkard. An old drunkard's eyes were deep, and the Sky Emperor's eyes were calm as they faced the attacks. Surging saint energy rushed out of their bodies. It seemed to be endless, and it kept getting stronger and stronger. World of destruction! The Sky Emperor suddenly opened his mouth and said these 4 words. With a loud rumble, the terrifying energy of the laws erupted like a volcano, crushing the 10 directions ancestral gods' first and second laws. It turned into a torrent that slammed into the 10 directions ancestral god. With a loud bang, the 10 directions ancestral god was knocked back 10,000 feet. Lin Tian was shocked. This seemed to be a new self-created law, and it was more like the second stage of the ancient world of destruction. At the same time, in the distance, the other ordinary gods trembled, and their expressions changed. Their invincible ancestor gods were pushed back by the Sky Emperor again. In their impression, their ancestor god was invincible, and no one was his match. Countless years ago, the Celestial Emperor and the Human King could only drag their ancestor god to the past to restrain him. They were no match for him at all. But now, they actually saw their ancestor god being forced back several times and injured. The ancestor god stabilized himself thousands of feet away. His expression didn't change at all as he walked back step by step. With a boom, the first and second divine halos behind him became even brighter. Divine arrogance of 10 directions! Divine descent! He said coldly. These 2 laws were self-created, and they surpassed the 10th dimension laws born by heaven and earth. At this moment, they erupted with extreme power. In this space, the void was silently annihilated, and the destructive aura was extremely terrifying. Lin Tian couldn't help but tremble. This kind of aura made his soul feel cold, and the feeling of death was extremely strong. Endless illusion! An old drunkard spoke, and his eyes became extremely deep in an instant. It seemed to be more terrifying than the Rinnegan, and he could see through everything. Sizzling sounds rang out as the 2 laws that the ancestral god had summoned were annihilated. A wave of laws that did not carry any destructive aura landed on the ancestral god's body and smashed him into the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. Lin Tian's heart palpitated, and he trembled again. The second stage of the illusion void flower law? So strong! His heart couldn't help but twitch. The ancestor gods, who had pushed the 2 laws of the proud god of 10 directions and divine descent to the limit, were pushed into the ground in an instant. Looking at his father and master, at this moment, he could clearly feel that he, who thought he could compare to these 2 existences, was in reality roughly several dozen times weaker than the 2 of them. The difference was too obvious. Boom! The territory shook, and the next moment, it broke open. A holy light rushed into the sky, and the ancestor gods rose from the ground again. Very good! Very good! Looking at the Celestial Emperor and the Human King, his eyes became even colder. Behind him, the 3rd divine halo began to shine. An extremely terrifying law aura rippled out like water ripples, and the boundless space and earth trembled violently. The Celestial Emperor and an old drunkard's eyes were deep, and the aura outside their bodies rose again. The self-created law fluctuations intertwined and greeted the ancestor gods. Remember your master's words, your potential is far greater than ours. If you want to improve and become stronger, you can be far faster than us. The Celestial Emperor's back was facing Lin Tian now. The moment he finished speaking, he moved. Along with an old drunkard, the self-created law surged out mightily. Divine Wander 8 Desolates! A cold voice rang out. Behind the ancestor gods, the 3rd divine halo vibrated, and the new self-created law intertwined, and everything in its path collapsed. The Celestial Emperor and an old drunkard attacked, and their respective laws met one after another, gradually becoming stronger. Boom! The three of them collided, and their holy energy filled the sky. Lin Tian watched from the side as his father and master fought against the ancestor gods. For a moment, his eyes shone brightly, and the blood in his body began to boil as if it was being boiled. The Eye of Destiny and the Rinnegan vibrated at the same time. Although his combat strength was dozens of times weaker than his father and master, he still charged forward without hesitation and fought against the ancestor gods together with the two of them. As he fought fiercely, his eyes shone even brighter. He carefully observed the self-created laws of his father and master, and the three laws of the ancestor gods. Although he couldn't learn them, he could use them to stimulate his body. He believed in his father and master's words. As long as he was willing, as long as he had confidence, he could quickly become stronger. Boom! 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 As the four of them fought fiercely, the space kept rumbling, and the ground kept collapsing. As time passed, the light in Lin Tian's eyes became brighter, and the aura on his body became stronger. His soul roots were fully activated. This was a once-in-a-lifetime battle. He had to continue to improve in this battle. He firmly believed that he could continue to grow stronger. He attacked the 10 ancestral gods again and again, attacking them head-on. Even though he was knocked back time and time again, and blood was constantly spurting out of his body, he did not retreat at all. Not bad. Very good. The Celestial Emperor and the Human King spoke at the same time. The ancestor god's eyes were cold as they fell on Lin Tian, and he reached out to grab Lin Tian. Boundless laws pressed down mightily. Why don't you let the kid go first and deal with us? An old drunkard laughed, and the everlasting illusion laws met the ancestor god's attacks. The Heavenly Emperor didn't say anything, and the Nirvana universe laws shook for thousands of miles. With one law, 10,000 Daos were annihilated. Lin Tian's comprehension was improving, and it was obvious that he was on the path of transformation. The two of them could see that, and they wouldn't let the ancestor gods disturb him at this moment. The ancestor gods snorted coldly. You call someone who controls reincarnation a kid? Behind him, his third divine ring released an even more frightening holy soul, and the laws of the universe suppressed and sealed everything. An old drunkard smiled faintly, and the Heavenly Emperor didn't say anything as he faced the ancestor gods head-on. Lin Tian attacked from the side, and the light in his eyes became brighter. The laws of dimensions in his body kept mixing outside his body, and there were thousands of changes in an instant. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. 3 days later, with a bang, the third divine ring behind the ancestor gods shone brightly, and the aura of laws shook. An old drunkard and the Heavenly Emperor were forced to retreat hundreds of feet. The ancestor gods opened his hand, and endless light shone as he grabbed at Lin Tian. It was also at this moment that the light in Lin Tian's eyes became extremely hazy, like strands of turbid light intertwining. He waved his hands, and a special fluctuation of laws gradually appeared, and then it became stronger rapidly. Chaotic 9 heavens! Boom! Heaven and earth shook. As soon as the 4 words came out, an extremely turbulent aura burst out like a destructive storm, and with him as the starting point, it swept toward the ancestor gods mercilessly. Poof! Blood splattered everywhere as the 10 ancestral gods' giant hands were instantly shattered and blasted apart. Then, in the next moment, there was another poof, and golden blood splattered again. The ancestor gods shook violently, and half of their bodies were smashed. Ancestor gods! Chapter 2489. Golden blood splattered in the air and flowed in large patches. How? How is this possible? The ordinary gods couldn't believe their eyes. Half of their ancestral god's body had been destroyed. Nothing like this had ever happened before. It's stronger than our current laws. An old drunkard smiled. The Celestial Emperor nodded and smiled. Lin Tian's eyes glowed with divine light. His murky eyes gradually brightened, and then they shone again. In the past 3 days, he had integrated all the dimensional laws except reincarnation and studied the laws of the Celestial Emperor, an old drunkard, and the ancestral god of 10 directions. With the full potential of his soul root, he had created his own law that surpassed the laws of the 10th dimension. The ancestral god of 10 directions' eyes glowed with divine light. His shattered body recovered in the blink of an eye, and he looked at Lin Tian without blinking. His third law, which even the celestial emperor and the human king couldn't defeat, was destroyed by Lin Tian in an instant. Moreover, half of his body was destroyed. Lin Tian looked up at the ancestral god of 10 directions. His eyes glowed. At this moment, he could clearly feel that he was closer to his master and father in terms of combat power. In the next moment, he stepped forward and took the initiative to close in on the ancestral god of 10 directions. A special law fluctuation surrounded him. He raised his hand, and the law fluctuation surrounded his fist as he punched out. Boom! The void rumbled as if a sacred drum had been beaten. The ancestral god of 10 directions' third law was shattered by the punch, and Lin Tian's fist landed steadily on his chest. The ancestral god of 10 directions' eyes were cold. He raised his hand and pointed his sword at Lin Tian's fist. The fist and the sword finger collided with each other. It was like two pieces of divine metal colliding with each other, emitting an ear-piercing rumble. Bolts of lightning interweaved in the surroundings, crackling and ringing. "Chaotic 9 heavens!" Lin Tian said. At the tip of his fist, the law erupted like a volcano, twisting, destroying, and suppressing everything. With a poof, the ancestral god of 10 directions' sword finger was shattered, and his fist smashed toward his chest. The ancestral god of 10 directions tried to dodge, but the distorted space pulled him back. Pooh! Lin Tian's fist landed on his chest, penetrating it. Golden blood splattered everywhere. At the same time, with a clang, the reincarnation sword behind him vibrated and emitted a monstrous sword cry. Coupled with the chaotic 9 heavens law that he had comprehended, it transformed into a dazzling divine rainbow and arrived before the 10 ancestral gods in the blink of an eye. "Junior, don't be too proud of yourself," Ancestral God 10 directions said coldly. As soon as he finished speaking, his majestic aura vibrated and turned into a torrent of saint energy that spread out. With a clang, the reincarnation sword was sent flying. Lin Tian's body also trembled violently, and he was sent flying for more than 1,000 feet. "It's not unreasonable for you to be able to control the cycle of reincarnation in 3 days. Your potential surpasses mine." The next moment, his figure appeared in front of Lin Tian. It was even faster than teleportation. Even with the Rinnegan, Lin Tian couldn't see it clearly. He could only vaguely feel the aura of the law. "The fourth law, divine world," Ancestral God 10 directions said coldly as he slapped his palm toward Lin Tian. Lin Tian didn't dare to be careless. He immediately activated his saint energy to the limit and faced the attack with the reincarnation diagram. Crack! A crisp sound rang out as the completed reincarnation diagram shattered. The ancestral god of 10 directions' giant palm landed squarely on his chest. In an instant, he felt as if a meteorite had crashed into his chest. He immediately coughed out a mouthful of blood, and all the bones in his body were shattered. He gritted his teeth. His eye of destiny shook slightly, and he teleported tens of thousands of feet away. At the same time, the reincarnation heart sutra operated on its own, and 9-colored saint light surrounded him. In the blink of an eye, his injuries were healed. When he looked at Ancestral God 10 directions again, his heart couldn't help but tremble. His opponent was too terrifying. The divine world law was even faster than his eye of destiny's teleportation ability. Even with the Rinnegan, he couldn't see his opponent's movements clearly. One must know that his current cultivation was not much inferior to his father's and master's. Even with this level of cultivation, the reincarnation forging mind technique and the undying law to increase his strength, coupled with the Rinnegan, he was still unable to see clearly. How fast was he? Then, he looked at the 6 divine rings behind Ancestral God 10 directions. These divine rings were formed by Ancestral God 10 directions' self-created laws. They were a kind of symbol, and each one was more terrifying than the last. How could he defeat Ancestral God 10 directions? He was truly invincible. However, although he thought of this, he didn't show the slightest bit of fear. No matter how strong his opponent was, the goal of this battle wouldn't change. He had to stop his opponent in the 10 divine domain. He had to defeat his opponent. Very good. The Heavenly Emperor walked over and faced Ancestral God 10 Directions with a smile. He didn't hide the praise in his eyes. An old drunkard walked up and nodded with a smile. He didn't say anything. In 3 days, Lin Tian had comprehended his own laws and undergone a transformation. This was worthy of their praise. Then, their gazes fell on Ancestral God 10 Directions again. The aura around his body grew stronger. Lin Tian also looked at Ancestral God 10 Directions with a solemn expression. Ancestral God 10 Directions looked at the 3 of them, then at a distant location in the 10 divine domain. You're fighting to the death to protect the lives of the people below. I don't think you can do it, he said indifferently. He said indifferently as he pointed with his finger. The divine rule of heaven and earth combined with the divine light cut across the sky in the blink of an eye, heading toward the tunnel of heaven and earth that connected the 10 divine realms and the 9th dimension. It penetrated the seals set by the Celestial Emperor, and then the divine light continued on, destroying the seal of the gate of heaven and earth at the other end of the 9th dimension. The Heavenly Emperor sensed it, and narrowed his eyes. Naturally, he could sense that the seal he set was broken. Now, any god in the 10 divine domain could pass through the gate of heaven and earth. Boys, kill them! Ancestral God 10 Directions said indifferently. The group of gods also sensed it, and they instantly understood the ancestral god's intentions. Yes! Kill! The gods' eyes lit up with excitement as they charged toward the gate of heaven and earth. Don't even think about it, Lin Tianling said. His Rinnegan trembled slightly, and a vast expanse of light of reincarnation swept out and pressed down on the surroundings. For a moment, the path of the gods was cut off, and many of them were shattered. The light of reincarnation was nothing to the ancestral god 10 Directions, but it was a disaster for the ordinary gods. Ancestral God 10 Directions snorted coldly. His holy light surged and pressed down on Lin Tian, not giving Lin Tian any chance to stop the gods. The gods moved again and charged toward the gate of heaven and earth that connected the 9th dimension. What's the hurry? A lazy and calm voice sounded. An old drunkard spoke. He didn't do anything, but he pushed back the gods charging toward the gate of heaven and earth. Don't you want the heart of the 10th dimension? I'll get it for you. As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his head and formed a simple hand seal. An invisible light intertwined and spread out. Almost at the same time, the sacred inscriptions lit up in every corner of the 4-dimensional world and 10 Directions' ancient star. The supreme aura of heaven and earth intertwined and produced endless light, illuminating every corner. What's going on? These sacred inscriptions. In the 10 Directions' ancient star, countless beings were shocked. Then, in the blink of an eye, all the living beings on this ancient planet disappeared without a sound and appeared in another vast world in the 4-dimensional world. At the same time, the 10 Directions' ancient star trembled, and an invisible starry gate opened in the starry sky, disappearing from the 4-dimensional world and reappearing in the 9-dimensional world. Following the heaven and earth gate that connected the 10 Directions' divine domain to the 9 Directions' divine domain, it didn't take long before it appeared in the 10 Directions' divine domain, about 1,000 feet behind the old drunkard. As they appeared in the 10 Directions' divine domain, the light around the 10 Directions' ancient star became even more hazy and vast. Such a scene shocked Lin Tian. The 10 Directions' ancient star was moved here by an old drunkard. He quickly scanned the 10 Directions' ancient star with his divine thought, and found that there were no more beings in it. Then, he realized that an old drunkard must have used some special means to move the beings in the 10 Directions' ancient star away. The Heavenly Emperor was very calm. Obviously, he already knew about this. This is the core of our divine domain, the heart of 10 dimensions. In the distance, the ordinary deities were excited and shocked. At this time, they felt the special aura of the 10 Directions' ancient star. It was so obvious that it coexisted with the 10 Directions' divine domain. At this moment, looking at the 10 directions ancient star, no deities went down to the heaven and earth below. For the first time, the ancestral god of 10 directions' eyes lit up as he stared at the 10 directions ancient star behind an old drunkard. "Human king, you've done well," said the ancestral god of 10 directions ancient star. Even he, the number one deity, couldn't deduce the location of the heart of 10 dimensions, but the human king found it. After saying that, he didn't say anything else. He took a step forward and used the law of God traversing the heavens. In an instant, he appeared in front of the 10 directions ancient star and grabbed it. This was the heart of 10 directions, the core of the divine domain. It was the most important existence to him, and the 10 directions divine domain. His speed was extremely fast, but in the next moment, the 10 directions ancient star disappeared silently and reappeared in another place. "Ancestral God, why are you in such a hurry? You still can't merge with it and get its approval. Why don't you think about how to deal with us first?" An old drunkard smiled. Lin Tian was moved. Hearing this, he understood a lot in an instant. Back then, an old drunkard had set up layers of traps on the 10 directions ancient star. Although he couldn't merge with it, he was now moving the 10 directions ancient star with the law of God traversing the heavens. Even the ancestral god of 10 directions' law of God traversing the heavens was faster than an old drunkard. Chapter 2490. The ancestral god of 10 directions looked at an old drunkard, and his deep eyes became even colder. In the next moment he moved. He didn't just grab the 10 directions ancient star. Instead, he used the sacrificial god art to attack an old drunkard. Majestic law fluctuations intertwined and enveloped Lin Tian and the celestial arch. "You're right. I'll deal with you first. I have all the time in the world. Let's see how long you can last," he said coldly. Boom! The 10 directions ancient star rumbled, and the void distorted. The omnidirectional law was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of an old drunkard and threw a punch at an old drunkard. It was so fast that it was almost impossible to dodge. Clang! The ear-piercing sound of a sword echoed. A sharp sword light slashed out, intertwining with the law fluctuations of nirvana. The ancestral god of 10 directions sidestepped the attack and looked at the celestial arch. "You can see clearly?" he said coldly. Even Lin Tian was surprised. The omnidirectional ancestral god's laws of God traversing the world were even faster than his eye of destiny, but his father had actually been able to clearly capture his opponent's movements. At the critical moment, he slashed out with his law sword, forcing his opponent to dodge. The celestial arch didn't say anything. He held the nirvana divine sword and slashed out. The sword light swept across the sky and slashed toward his opponent. Behind the ancestral god of 10 directions, his fourth divine halo flashed. The omnidirectional law was continuously used to dodge. However, the celestial Thearka's sword light was always able to get close. The ancestral god of 10 directions' eyes intertwined. After a dozen breaths, a ring of origin divine light spread out. "Appear!" he said coldly. As the divine spiritual light rolled out, one imperial seal after another appeared in the void, covering every inch of the void within a radius of 10,000 feet. And in the center was the celestial emperor. "I see," he said coldly. Lin Tian also understood. With such imperial seals spread out in all directions, no matter where the ancestral god of 10 directions moved, he would touch the imperial seals. His father was precisely relying on the vibrations of the imperial seals to accurately capture the trajectory of the ancestral god of 10 directions. "As expected of the celestial arch," an old drunkard laughed. The eyes of the ancestral gods of the 10 directions were cold and indifferent as they swept out. "It's not a big deal. Break for me." His self-created third law swept out, engulfing all of the imperial seals. However, in the next moment, all 10 ancestral gods frowned. As the third law swept past, not a single imperial seal was shattered. "If I don't die, the seal won't shatter," the Sky Emperor said calmly. The ancestral god's eyes were cold. Then I'll kill you. As soon as he finished speaking, he stepped forward, and the first law, second law, and third law vibrated at the same time. A boundless aura of laws pressed toward the heavenly emperor. The celestial darch swung the sword of nirvana, and a majestic aura shook the surroundings, enveloping every inch of space. As expected of Father, Lin Tian's eyes glowed as he channeled the dragon burial scripture. Together with the origin, he created a sky full of dragon marks. Each of the dragon marks contained the aura of his reincarnation origin, just like his father's imperial seal. As long as he didn't die, the dragon marks wouldn't shatter. Chaotic 9 heavens. Without any unnecessary movements, he stepped toward the ancestral gods and pulled open the self-created law he had comprehended. An old drunkard laughed as the boundless imperial seal appeared. Like the celestial darch, it captured the ancestral god's trajectory. Boundless illusion. The second self-created law was unleashed. Together with the Sky Emperor's Nirvana universe and Lin Tian's chaotic 9 heavens law, it enveloped the ancestral gods. Rumble! There was a fierce collision. In this place, space was annihilated, and territory collapsed. The three of them worked together and had a special way to deal with the ancestral god's fourth law, God traversing the world. For a moment, the ancestral gods were at a disadvantage. Chaotic 9 heavens. Lin Tian spoke again, urging the chaotic 9 heavens law to be even stronger. Nirvana universe. Eternal fantasy. The celestial darch and the human kings spoke at the right time. At this moment, they unleashed the third self-created law. As soon as the third law was unleashed, its aura even overpowered Lin Tian's chaotic 9 heavens law. With a sizzling sound, the divine radiance and law radiance around the ancestral gods were annihilated in the blink of an eye. Poof! Golden blood splattered as half of his body was crushed. It was a shocking sight. Ancestral gods. In the distance, the group of ordinary gods trembled again. Up until now, their ancestral gods had been injured time and time again. However, the ancestral god's expression did not change. His eyes were still cold. Not bad. With a boom, the fifth divine ring behind him began to tremble. An extremely terrifying law aura spread out with him as the center, toward Lin Tian, the celestial darch, and an old drunkard. Poof! 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 3 streams of blood splattered as the three were sent flying at the same time. All of them were badly mutilated. As expected of the ancestral gods. This is only the fifth law. An old drunkard was bleeding from the corner of his mouth. His body was covered in blood, but he still had a smile on his face. However, we have already used our full strength. The celestial darch was also covered in blood, but his expression was still calm. He did not say anything. Lin Tian was also badly injured. Like an old drunkard and the celestial darch, he was covered in blood. His expression was solemn. The reincarnation forging mind technique, the three-dimensional world, the reincarnation eye, the reincarnation sword, and the chaotic 9 heavens law. He had used all of his trump cards. Together with his master and father, he still could not defeat the ancestral gods. The other party was too strong. However, such a 10 ancestral gods still had 5 even stronger laws that he had yet to utilize. Each of those 5 laws was definitely more terrifying than the last, and their might was more terrifying than the last. It was truly difficult for him to imagine exactly how tyrannical his opponent's peak combat strength was. What other tricks do you have? I will wait for you to use them, the ancestral god of 10 directions said. He stood in the sky like an ancient emperor, looking at Lin Tian, the celestial darch, and the human king as if he was looking at his subjects. What other tricks can they have? They have already reached their limits against you, Lord Ancestral God. They are no match for you. This is the difference in dimensions. They are powerless. Off in the distance, a group of ordinary gods looked over at the 10 ancestral gods with reverence in their eyes. At this time, another voice sounded. Not necessarily. In the distance, 3 beautiful figures walked over. They were 3 women. The goddess, the All Heaven's Holy Maiden, and Wu Yi. The three of them naturally sensed that the human king had moved the ancient star to the 10 directions divine domain. The All Heaven's Holy Maiden knew that the human king and the celestial Darch had returned. She also knew that the ancestral gods had returned from the past and started a war in the 10 directions divine domain. They had immediately set off for the 10 directions divine domain and arrived at this place. The ancestral god looked at the three with indifferent eyes. He did not care about the goddess and the celestial Darch at all. His divine will was so powerful that he could clearly sense that the three women were far inferior to Lin Tian, the celestial Darch, and the human king. Mother Masteress! Lin Tian was moved. Then, his gaze fell on Wu Yi. You're here. He looked at Wu Yi with gentleness and joy in his eyes. Amen. Wu Yi nodded. At this time, the celestial Darch and an old drunkard naturally saw the goddess, the All Heaven's Holy Maiden, and Wu Yi. It's time for us to retreat. An old drunkard looked at the celestial Darch and smiled. The celestial Darch nodded. An old drunkard had told him many things, so he naturally understood what an old drunkard meant. I'll leave it to you. He looked at Lin Tian with a gentle gaze. With that, the two of them retreated at the same time, leaving only Lin Tianyi on the battlefield. Such a scene shocked the ordinary gods in the distance. They felt that the current celestial Darch and an old drunkard were at least 20 times stronger than Lin Tian. But now, the two of them had retreated and left the weakest Lin Tian on the battlefield. This puzzled them. Even the 10 ancestral gods were puzzled. Celestial Darch, human king, what do you mean? Lin Tian controlled reincarnation and was extraordinary. But now, his combat strength was still inferior to the celestial Darch and the human king. But now, at this time, the strongest celestial Darch and the human king had abandoned Lin Tian and left the battlefield, leaving the weaker Lin Tian to face him alone. This puzzled him. He knew that the celestial Darch and the human king were not cowards. Outside Lin Tian's body, wisps of divine light intertwined, and 9-colored divine light flowed. He stepped forward and walked toward the 10 ancestral gods. His attitude caused the 10 ancestral gods' eyes to narrow slightly. You seem to think that you can face me alone? He looked at Lin Tiandao. Where did you get this sudden confidence from? Lin Tiandan smiled, but his footsteps did not change. Because my wife is here. As his words fell, the faint sound of a flute sounded. It was gentle and soft, like the purest divine sound of heaven and earth. Boom! Outside his body, the divine light shook, and his aura skyrocketed. It grew in a geometrical manner, as if it was going to break through the sky. In the blink of an eye, his aura had increased by 500 times. Then, this aura did not stop growing. It continued to increase until it was 1,000 times stronger. The 10 ancestral gods were moved, and their eyes narrowed. Lin Tian's aura had increased 1,000 times in an instant. 1,000 times. Even Lin Tian himself was moved. He could not help but stop and look back at Wu Yi with a shocked expression. Wu Yi played the Reincarnation Tribulation Crossing song. Together with the Reincarnation Forging Divine Art and the completely unsealed Reincarnation Origin in his body, it could increase his combat strength by 500 times at most. But now, it had increased to 1,000 times. It's my responsibility to make you stronger. Wu Yi played the Reincarnation Tribulation Crossing song in the distance, and at the same time, transmitted her voice through divine consciousness. She looked at Lin Tian with a gentle gaze. Go. In the past few years, she had given up on improving her own cultivation. Instead, she had been in seclusion to improve the Reincarnation Tribulation Crossing song. Finally, 5 months ago, she had achieved results. The Reincarnation Tribulation Crossing song had become more profound and extraordinary than before. Together with the Reincarnation Forging Divine Art, it could unleash even more amazing effects, and could increase Lin Tian's combat strength even more. Hearing this, Lin Tian's body trembled. He instantly guessed that Wu Yi must have improved the Reincarnation Tribulation Crossing song in the past few years. Looking at Wu Yi, he was moved, but at this time, he did not say anything. He took a deep breath, turned around, and looked at the 10 ancestral gods again. The 10 ancestral gods' eyes shone brightly. "Come, human! Let me see how strong you are now." Around his body, the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth laws revolved together. At the same time, the sixth divine halo behind him vibrated, and the sixth laws intertwined together. His aura also skyrocketed. Lin Tian's eyes were deep. The next moment he moved. He took a simple step forward and instantly appeared in front of the 10 ancestral gods. The 10 ancestral gods were moved. "You bang!" Chapter 2491. Golden blood splattered in the void. It was a ghastly sight. The ancestral god of 10 directions was pierced through. As he was sent flying, his blood continued to splatter as he crashed through the void. In the distance, the ordinary gods were all shocked. Ancestral! Ancestral god! The ancestral god of 10 directions steadied himself and looked at Lin Tian from afar. His eyes were deep and indifferent, but there was a hint of sharpness in them. "Human!" He looked at Lin Tian and said in a cold voice. At this time, he had used the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth laws at the same time. However, all of these laws were shattered by Lin Tian with a simple punch. At this moment, Lin Tian clearly felt that his energy, spirit, and other aspects were far superior to before. "Is it because of her?" He tilted his head and looked at Wu Yi. He naturally felt that Lin Tian's change had something to do with Wu Yi. His eyes were cold, and 2 beams of sharpness shot out from his eyes and slashed toward Wu Yi like a peerless killing sword. It was incomparably fierce. Lin Tian's eyes flickered slightly. The light of reincarnation intertwined and directly shattered the killing light that the ancestral god of 10 directions had sent toward Wu Yi. "Your opponent is me," he said indifferently. The ancestral god of 10 directions glanced at Wu Yi and then looked at Lin Tian. "Not bad. The 2 of you are not bad." As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared in an instant. He was so fast that no one could see him clearly, and he appeared behind Lin Tian. Almost at the same time, Lin Tian flipped his hand and slapped out, distorting the space around him. The ancestral god of 10 directions was startled. He hurriedly crossed his arms in front of his chest. In the next moment, Lin Tian's palm landed on his arms and shattered them with a crack. Once again, the ancestral god of 10 directions was sent flying thousands of feet away. "Don't play tricks. It won't work on me now." Lin Tian now. The ancestral god of 10 directions narrowed his eyes. Just now, he had used the rule of God traversing the heavens, but Lin Tian did not use the dragon mark void to sense his movement trajectory. It was obvious that Lin Tian had seen his movement trajectory with just his eyes. "There's a huge difference from before," said the ancestral god of 10 directions. As soon as he finished speaking, his aura started to rise. Behind him, his 7th divine ring started to vibrate, and light shone in all directions. In the blink of an eye, his essence, chi, and soul had increased explosively. "Divine thousand chaotic slash," he said coldly. Immediately, with him as the center, boundless sword light swept toward Lin Tian from all directions. The destructive aura was terrifying to the extreme. "Can the Sky Emperor block it?" An old drunkard smiled faintly and asked the Celestial Emperor. "I can't block it," the Sky Emperor said calmly. "More or less," an old drunkard said with a smile. At this moment, the power of the ancestral god of 10 directions' 7th law was too terrifying. Even as strong as the 2 of them were, they were not confident that they could block it. If they faced it head-on, even if they did not die, they would definitely suffer unimaginable injuries. The faces of the goddesses and saintesses turned slightly pale. Just by sensing the fluctuation of the rule of God from afar, they felt as if their divine souls were about to be destroyed. Wu Yi played the flute, and it was very quiet. The reincarnation tribulation transcendence song was gentle and melodious, and it was as pleasant as the sacred music of heaven and earth. In the blink of an eye, the 7th law fell in front of Lin Tian. It was also at this moment that Lin Tian moved. With a flick of his finger, a ray of sword light shot out like a rainbow that could split open the sky. With a hiss, the seventh law of the ancestral god of 10 directions instantly collapsed. Then, the sword light did not slow down. In the next moment, it fell in front of the ancestral god of 10 directions and pierced through his chest with a puff, bringing out a pool of golden blood. An old drunkard smiled. So did the heavenly emperor. The ancestral god of 10 directions' eyes darkened. He had already activated the seventh law, but it was shattered with a flick of his finger. Lin Tian met the ancestral god's gaze calmly. Ancestral god, I'm here. He addressed the ancestral god of 10 directions like an old drunkard. As soon as he finished speaking, he appeared in front of the ancestral god of 10 directions. The ancestral god of 10 directions was shocked. At this moment, Lin Tian's speed was even faster than before. He could not react at all. Dong! The sky shook. Lin Tian swung his fist. It was just a simple punch, and it came crashing down. However, this simple punch instantly sealed the space in front of the ancestral god of 10 directions. It was as if the ancestral god of 10 directions had fallen into a mud bath. For a moment, he could not even move his body. In the next moment, Lin Tian's fist landed on the ancestral god of 10 directions' chest. Poof! A mist of blood exploded. This time, the powerful ancestral god of 10 directions' entire body was smashed into pieces. Bits of flesh and bones flew everywhere. Lord Ancestral God. In the distance, the group of ordinary gods trembled. Their invincible ancestral god had his body smashed into pieces. Boom! Sacred light shot into the sky. The pieces of flesh and bones that filled the sky squirmed and reformed in the blink of an eye. The ancestral god of 10 directions had reformed his body again. His eyes were cold as he grabbed at Lin Tian. Lin Tian's eyes were indifferent. He raised his hand and swung his sword. Boundless reincarnation sword light turned into a sword domain that pressed down on the ancestral god of 10 directions. The sharp sword aura immediately suppressed every corner around the ancestral god of 10 directions. The ancestral god of 10 directions' newly reformed body was instantly pierced into a hornet's nest. Blood splattered in the void again. Gurgling sounds could be heard. The ancestral god of 10 directions reformed his body in the blink of an eye. Clang! The first law to the seventh law merged at the same time, turning into a dazzling 7-star sacred blade. It was about 30 meters long and looked extremely hazy, as if it could cut the world apart. Lin Tian stepped forward without dodging. His eye of reincarnation trembled slightly. Incomparable reincarnation light intertwined and shattered the 7-star sacred blade. In the next moment, a bestial roar shook the sky. 100-meter-tall reincarnation beast appeared behind the ancestral god of 10 directions. It was completely formed from the purest reincarnation light. It clawed at the ancestral god of 10 directions, piercing through the void and earth. Poof! The ancestral god of 10 directions exploded again. He couldn't resist the reincarnation beast's claw. Smoke and dust flew everywhere. The ancestral god of 10 directions was pierced through and smashed into the ground, causing cracks to appear on the surface. Lin Tian didn't pursue. He stood in the void and looked down indifferently. Boom! A pillar of divine light shot into the sky. The ancestral god of 10 directions rushed out of the ground in the next moment, his 10 divine halos still revolving behind him. Ancestral god, are you willing to give up on refining the worlds below? Under the 10 divine domains, there are a total of 6 heavens and earths with living beings. Do you know how many lives there are in all 6 heavens and earths? If you want to refine these worlds, countless lives will die tragically. It's too cruel and tyrannical. He looked at the ancestral god of 10 directions. If you're willing to give up on refining these worlds, we'll return the 10th dimensional core to you. My father and master won't have any objections. 10 divine halos revolved behind the ancestral god of 10 directions. He looked at Lin Tian. Although his physical body had been destroyed several times, he didn't show any signs of humiliation. There was no anger in his eyes either. He was still cold and deep. When he heard Lin Tian's words, his gaze deepened. Since the birth of the divine regions, I've been the only ancestral god. I've lived alone in the divine regions for many epochs. Your father doesn't know, your master doesn't know, you don't know, and even I've forgotten. It's been too long, so long that I can't remember clearly. He looked at Lin Tian and said calmly, Back then, I was alone in the divine regions, but I've already reached this level. No matter what, I can't go on any further. It's like there's a door in front of me that's tightly shut, and I can't push it open. In the future, other ancestral gods came into being one after another. I've always been searching for a way to break through. Although I failed in the process of fusing with the 10th dimensional core, I vaguely sensed a higher dimension, a higher world. Don't think that it's an illusion. You should know very well that at my cultivation level, even if it's an illusion, it's not without reason. In the 10 divine regions, there's an even higher world above the 10th dimensional core. There's no doubt about it, he said. It's just that at that time, I could only vaguely sense it. After that, I couldn't sense it anymore. It's like the beings of the lower realms can't sense the barrier of the upper realms before their cultivation and strength reach a certain level. They can't find the way to the higher realms. Based on that vague perception, I know very well that even if I successfully fuse with the 10th dimensional core, it's still difficult to obtain the power to open the door to a higher dimension. For this reason, I need to combine all the energy of the lower realms and integrate it into the 10 divine regions to strengthen it. Then, I'll fuse with the core of the 10 divine regions, the 10th dimensional core, to produce the greatest transformation possible. I'll combine the energy of the 10 divine regions and the lower realms to open the door to a higher dimension. Looking at Lin Tian, his eyes gradually lit up. Human, how about it? Follow me? Together, we'll refine the lower realms and integrate them into the 10 divine regions to forge a new, extremely powerful realm to open the path to a higher dimension. In this way, we'll be the pioneers, the people who open up the path ahead. We can create an even more glorious cultivation path for the beings of the future. Lin Tian was moved. There was a higher dimension above the 10 divine regions? The 11th dimension? He was shocked by this, and he didn't doubt the ancestral god's words in the slightest. Because it was indeed as the ancestral god had said. With the ancestral god's cultivation, it was impossible for him to have such a misconception for no reason. Once he had such a hazy feeling, then that feeling was definitely real, and there was no doubt about it. There's a higher dimension above our 10 divine regions? There's an even more powerful realm? This, Lord Ancestral God. This is real? How is this possible? In the distance, the group of ordinary gods was shocked. They'd always thought that the 10 divine realm they resided in was the highest dimension, but now they'd learned from their ancestral god that the 10 divine realm wasn't the highest dimension, and that there were higher realms. How could they not be moved? Behind them, the all-heavens goddesses and all-heavens saintesses paled. Wu Yi, who was playing the reincarnation tribulation crossing song, was also moved. Chapter 2492. The 10 Directions Divine Dominion, the 10th dimension, and the fact that there was a higher dimension above it was too shocking, and it tugged at everyone's nerves. What do you think, human? The ancestral god's eyes shone brightly as he looked at Lin Tian, then at the celestial arch and the human king. What do you think? Follow me and open up a more glorious path of cultivation, step into a higher dimension, and leave your name behind for eternity. Our paths are different. The old drunkard laughed. It was still the same 3 words from before. Impossible. The celestial Thearcha's words were simple. Lin Tian was shocked by the fact that there was a higher dimension above the 10 Directions Divine Dominion. When he heard the ancestral god's invitation again, he gradually recovered and calmly shook his head. Using the deaths of countless living beings to pave a more glorious path of cultivation. What you meant by leaving your name behind for eternity is probably just infamy. He looked at the ancestral god and said calmly, I don't want future generations to criticize me behind my back. To be honest, I'm quite afraid of such things. Ever since he started cultivating, he had always had a clear conscience. he could do good things or not, but he could never do bad things. He couldn't do it if he had to step on the lives of countless living beings to open a higher dimension. The ancestral god didn't think much of it. Those who achieve great things don't care about trifles. Why should the strong care about what the weak say? I don't care if it's fake infamy, but if it's real infamy, I care very much and I'm very afraid, Lin Tian said calmly. The ancestral god's eyes darkened. So you still refuse me? You still want to stop me for a group of weaklings in the lower realm? Lin Tian still looked very calm. At this moment, he remembered something his sixth senior brother, Ao Jiantianzuan, had said before he recovered his memories after reincarnating. As the celestial arch, I will protect the peace of all living beings, he said. The ancestral god's face turned cold again. Good! As the celestial arch, I will protect the peace of all living beings. As the sound of his voice faded, the 1st to 7th divine rings lit up behind him. The 8th divine ring also trembled, shining brightly. His aura instantly reached an extremely terrifying level. It was much, much stronger than before. Lin Tian naturally felt the tyrannical aura of the other party at this moment, but his expression did not change. He took a step forward, and his speed was extremely fast. In an instant, he appeared in front of the 10 ancestral gods and punched them with a simple punch. The ancestral god of 10 directions' eyes were cold. The 1st law to the 8th law fused together and charged toward Lin Tian. The two collided in the blink of an eye. The radiance of destruction spread out in waves. Crack! 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 The void continued to collapse and was completely annihilated. It would be difficult for it to recover in a short period of time. The ancestral god of 10 directions seemed to have undergone a huge metamorphosis after using the 8th law. His aura was much, much stronger than before. At this moment, he faced Lin Tian's attack head-on and clashed with Lin Tian, not falling behind at all. Lin Tian's eyes were still calm. His fist and palm collided with each other, and he met the killing light of the other party's law again and again. Soon, dozens of breaths passed. In this place, large amounts of earth collapsed, almost completely beaten to the point where its appearance changed. It was also at this moment that he formed a seal and struck out his law. Chaotic 9 heavens. Boom! The void rumbled, and the saint's aura filled the sky. With a 1,000-fold increase in battle prowess, he disrupted the laws of the 9 heavens at this moment, and the power that erupted was far from what it was before. It instantly shattered all the laws that the 10 ancestral gods had summoned, and directly enveloped them. Poof! Blood mist splattered, and the ancestral god of 10 directions collapsed. Only his divine soul was left. When he looked at Lin Tian again, his eyes were even colder. However, there was still no sense of anger. He glanced at Wu Yi, who was playing the Reincarnation Tribulation Crossing song, and his gaze fell on Lin Tian again. In the next moment, the 9th divine ring behind him began to shine. This time, an even more terrifying divine aura spread out. His body seemed to have turned into an eternal storm of destruction. Such a scene made Lin Tian frown slightly. At this moment, the ancestral god of 10 directions, who had used the 9th law, still felt a great pressure, even though his combat strength had increased by 1,000-fold. As expected of the number 1 divine spirit. He said so. Compared to you, I have cultivated for a very long time. It's not an exaggeration to say that I have lived 100,000 times longer than you. However, even though I have lived 100,000 times longer than you, you still forced me to this point. It's not an exaggeration to say that I am humiliated, the ancestral god of 10 directions said. However, when he said the word, humiliated, his expression did not show any sense of humiliation. The two of them looked at each other, and the aura around their bodies rose steadily. In the next moment, the two of them fought again. 1,000 revolutions of oracle. The ancestral god of 10 directions said. Behind him, the 9th divine ring burst into a dazzling light, and the divine aura of a divine spirit filled the sky. This time, with a bang, Lin Tian was sent flying even though his combat strength had increased by 1,000-fold because of Wu Yi. Traces of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth, and it was bright red. Humans are ultimately not enough. Our ancestral god is invincible. Seeing that Lin Tian was injured by the ancestral god of 10 directions, the surrounding divine spirits could not help but be moved. They all clenched their fists, and someone could not help but say so. Previously, the ancestral god of 10 directions had been injured several times. Now that the ancestral god of 10 directions had injured Lin Tian, they could not help but feel excited. The ancestral god of 10 directions did not care about the voices of the divine spirits. He looked at Lin Tian, who was bleeding, and glanced at Wu Yi, who was playing the flute in the distance. Then, his gaze fell on Lin Tian again. The current you is far from using your full strength. There's no need to hide anything. Let me see how strong you are now. Lin Tian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked at the ancestral god of 10 directions. You too. How strong can the 10th law be? Let's see if you can force me to use it. The ancestral god of 10 directions' eyes were deep. Then let's see. Lin Tian Andao. As soon as he finished speaking, his eye of destiny trembled slightly. He instantly used his teleportation ability and appeared behind the ancestral god of 10 directions. Dong! Without any complicated movements, he brandished the reincarnation fist art. With a punch, endless avatars of heaven and earth revolved around the tip of his fist. Mountains and rivers were collapsing, territories were sinking, the sky was shattering, stars were collapsing, and heaven and earth were being destroyed. The power of this punch was even stronger than the chaotic 9 heavens law from before. It was the most profound attack of his reincarnation fist. The ancestral god of 10 directions raised his hand, and the 9th law converged at the tip of his fist. He quickly turned around and faced Lin Tian's punch. The two fists were extremely close in the blink of an eye. In the next instant, they were about to collide. At this moment, Lin Tian's eye of destiny trembled slightly. He disappeared instantly and appeared on the other side of the ancestral god of 10 directions. Dong! The destructive punch landed firmly on the ancestral god of 10 directions. Immediately, a mist of blood splattered. The ancestral god of 10 directions was sent flying. His sturdy divine body exploded in the air. Very exciting. An indifferent voice was heard. The halos were hazy. Behind Lin Tian, divine halos flashed and intertwined with dense laws. Lin Tian was shocked. This was the 9th law divine halo of the ancestral god of 10 directions. He immediately dodged. However, the divine halo came too suddenly. In the end, he couldn't avoid it and was hit head-on. Like the ancestral god of 10 directions, his sturdy reincarnation body shattered. His flesh and blood wriggled. In 2 different directions, Lin Tian and the ancestral god of 10 directions condensed their physical bodies at the same time. The two of them faced each other. Their eyes glowed faintly. In the next moment, they moved again and charged at each other. Boom! An intense collision occurred again. Lin Tian wielded the reincarnation sword and swung the boundless reincarnation sword light. Together with the eye of reincarnation, he destroyed the sky. Behind the ancestral god of 10 directions, the 1st to 9th divine halos vibrated and intertwined with a boundless destructive holy light. 2 figures flickered here, vibrating with transparent light waves one after another. Lin Tian's eyes glowed. As he fought the ancestral god of 10 directions, he recalled his father and master's words. With his endless potential, he could experience such a battle. With the ancestral god of 10 directions as his opponent, as long as he wanted to, he could become stronger at an unimaginable speed. His limitless potential would be even more perfect. For a moment, his eyes became deep. The eye of destiny and the eye of reincarnation intertwined with holy light at the same time. As he fought the ancestral god of 10 directions, he comprehended his opponent's various laws and divine abilities. At the same time, he also comprehended his own body. Suddenly, as time passed, his essence, energy, and spirit became stronger and stronger. His aura became more and more solid and shocking. The ancestral god of 10 directions' eyes moved slightly. He naturally felt the change in Lin Tian, and the pressure on his body suddenly became much stronger. At the same time, the Sky Emperor and an old drunkard also felt it. The smiles on their faces became wider. "Not bad," an old drunkard said. The Sky Emperor didn't say anything. His gaze was gentle. They could feel that Lin Tian was beginning to improve again, and the speed of his improvement was very fast. Boom! The battle was intense, and holy light flashed. Lin Tian fought the ancestral god of 10 directions fiercely. The space in all 10 directions was constantly collapsing, and blood splattered in the void. It was the blood of the ancestral god of 10 directions, and also Lin Tian's own blood. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. After 3 months of fierce fighting, Lin Tian's aura continued to rise, and the light from his life origin became brighter and brighter. It was also on this day that Wu Yi stopped playing the reincarnation tribulation crossing song. Her gaze became gentler and gentler. "Wu Yi!" The goddess' expression changed slightly. She was a little confused why Wu Yi stopped playing the reincarnation tribulation crossing song at this time. "It's useless now," Wu Yi said softly. After 3 months of fierce fighting, Lin Tian continued to improve. On this day, his cultivation base, life origin, and spirit had all undergone at least 10 days of transformation. Now, the reincarnation tribulation crossing song could no longer affect the reincarnation origin, and the reincarnation forging spiritual art was also useless. Lin Tian was now so powerful that the reincarnation forging spiritual art and the reincarnation tribulation crossing song couldn't affect him at all. Boom! Monstrous holy energy swept across all directions. Lin Tian stepped forward. Without the support of the reincarnation forging spiritual art and the reincarnation tribulation crossing song, he threw a punch at the ancestral god of 10 directions. There wasn't a terrifying power, but the fist wave was clearly visible. It instantly destroyed everything. Poof! Chapter 2493. Ancestral God! In the distance, the group of ordinary gods couldn't help but exclaim. They were all trembling again. Their ancestral god had been severely injured by Lin Tian once again. His flesh and blood wriggled, and the ancestral god of 10 directions reformed his physical body in the blink of an eye. He looked at Lin Tian with an even brighter gaze. At the same time, his gaze became even more profound. Endless potential. Human, your progress is too fast. However, you can only reach the same realm as me at most. The lower realms won't allow us to step into higher realms. Looking at Lin Tian, he continued, "Are you really not going to consider opening the path to a higher dimension with me? We can step into a higher realm." Lin Tian shook his head. "If you want to open up the path of cultivation, I'm willing to work hard with you to achieve it. However, opening up the path for you will require the sacrifice of countless lives. That's too cruel, and such a path is meaningless. Then let's fight. Either I kill you and open up a more glorious path, or you kill me and continue to stay in this lower realm," the ancestral god of 10 directions said indifferently. Behind him, the 1st to 9th divine halos vibrated, and his essence, energy, and spirit became stronger in the blink of an eye. A surge of saint power swept through the area in waves, shaking the entire area. Lin Tian's gaze was calm and deep. An aura that was not weaker than the ancestral god of 10 directions intertwined. It was even stronger than when Wu Yi sang the reincarnation tribulation transcendence song to increase his combat power by 1,000 times. He calmly faced the ancestral god of 10 directions. In the blink of an eye, the two charged at each other and collided. Lin Tian swung the reincarnation fist while controlling the reincarnation sword with his mind. Every strike was filled with reincarnation sword light. Furthermore, all of the dimensional laws and the chaotic 9 heavens law that he had created intertwined around his body, transforming into wave after wave of laws that gave off an extremely frightening aura. For a time, everywhere in the 10 directions, large expanses of territory collapsed, and large expanses of the void collapsed. Bang! Lin Tian performed the reincarnation fist and landed a punch on the ancestral god of 10 directions' chest. His fist shook slightly and sent the ancestral god flying. "Sword, come," he said indifferently. As he finished speaking, the reincarnation sword turned into a ray of light and landed in his hand. He held it in his hand and slashed down. Clang! This time, he attacked with the reincarnation sword in hand, and its might was much, much stronger than when he controlled it with his will. It was practically a qualitative improvement. When he attacked with the sword, the surroundings fell silent, and in the blink of an eye, it pierced through the 10 ancestral gods. Golden blood splattered everywhere. The ancestral gods of all directions were crushed. Blood, flesh, and bones filled the sky. However, it was also at this moment that a beam of golden holy light fell. It was so fast that it pierced into Lin Tian's chest. Lin Tian was bleeding from his chest and the corner of his mouth. A wave of law energy began to run rampant in his body as if it had a consciousness. His body trembled slightly as the light of the origin of reincarnation surged, forcefully shattering this power of laws. He held the reincarnation sword in his hand and slashed out, creating a sea of reincarnation swords. The sharp sword light seemed to want to completely destroy the 10 divine regions. The ancestral gods of all directions were extremely powerful. In the blink of an eye, they reformed their physical bodies. Not bad. Very powerful. As he said so, he stretched out his right hand, and a golden ancestral god scepter appeared. Buzz! As soon as the ancestral god scepter appeared, the void buzzed. Divine light turned into a ripple and spread toward Lin Tian. Chi! 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 The reincarnation sword light that Lin Tian slashed out was instantly shattered. Not bad scepter! Lin Tian now. As he spoke, his eyes sparkled. With a rumble, he unleashed the pure young flames, which he had not unleashed for a long time, enveloping all of the dimensional laws and his own chaotic 9 heavens laws. Together with the Samsara sword, he slashed out a sword that could incinerate the heavens. The eyes of the ancestral gods of all directions were deep. They shook the ancestral god scepter, and countless ancient divine seals interweaved to meet this sword. The two collided with a rumble, and the aura shook heaven and earth. The sword of fire that burned the heavens was annihilated, and the countless ancient divine seals collapsed. The two stepped forward and charged at each other head-on. Clang! Boom! The sword whistled fiercely, and the divine light of the scepter buzzed. The aura of the two continued to rise. Such an aura made the ordinary deities who had retreated far away retreat again. They were all terrified. This kind of confrontation, this kind of aura, was too terrifying. An old drunkard and the celestial darch stood side by side. They looked ahead, and their eyes fell on Lin Tian. Although it's hard to determine the winner, my disciple has surpassed you. An old drunkard smiled. The celestial darch also smiled. You win. Although Lin Tian was his child, he did not teach Lin Tian anything. An old drunkard was the one who introduced the 5-year-old Lin Tian to the path of cultivation. Since then, an old drunkard had been taking care of Lin Tian and protecting Lin Tian. Lin Tian, his child, carried an old drunkard's legacy. Lin Tian had surpassed him, which meant that an old drunkard had defeated him. Boom! Monstrous saint energy surged like waves in the sea. It was an extreme transformation. Now, Lin Tian no longer needed the reincarnation forging spiritual art and the reincarnation tribulation overcoming song. These two arts could no longer affect his life origin and were no longer effective. However, his combat strength was undoubtedly much stronger than before when he had the reincarnation forging spiritual art and the reincarnation tribulation overcoming song. He no longer felt any pressure to fight the ancestral god of 10 directions alone. And now, he was on top. Bang! With a muffled groan, the ancestral god of 10 directions was sent flying again. Cracks appeared on the scepter. Human, you are really strong. Very strong. Perhaps you are not any weaker than me. The ancestral god of 10 directions steadied himself and looked at Lin Tian Dao. You have now reached a level where I can use my strongest law. Lin Tian did not continue to attack. He stood with the reincarnation sword in hand and looked at the ancestral god of 10 directions. I am honored to witness the strongest law of the first god. He looked at the ancestral god of 10 directions, and his aura began to grow again. Please, ancestral god. Let me see how strong the strongest law of the first god is. The ancestral god of 10 directions' eyes were deep. Behind him, his 10th divine halo began to shine. Suddenly, the vast 10 directions divine realm began to tremble, as if a truly destructive earthquake was about to happen. Lin Tian's eyes narrowed, and his expression turned grave. The ancestral god of 10 directions had not truly been used, but he already felt as if the sky was falling. Even the spirit in his sea of consciousness could not help but tremble slightly. Behind the ancestral god of 10 directions, the light from his 10th divine halo grew brighter and brighter, and the 10 directions divine realm shook even more violently. The oracle is collapsing. The ancestral god of 10 directions looked at Lin Tian and said calmly. As soon as he finished speaking, he moved. Step by step, he walked toward Lin Tian. Wherever he passed, countless strange phenomena appeared. Heaven and earth were collapsing, and all things were withering. Lin Tian's eyes became even more profound. An enormous pressure fell on his shoulders, as if heaven and earth were about to be destroyed. Then I will have to use my full strength, he said. As soon as he finished speaking, he faced the ancestral god of 10 directions. His life origin and spirit shone brightly, and an extremely terrifying aura rushed out immediately. Endless laws surrounded him, and with the purest and most tyrannical aura, he suppressed everything in the world. Just like the 10 ancestral gods, there were also countless unnatural phenomena that intertwined around them. It was as though they were real. Very strong, the ancestral god of 10 directions said. He looked at Lin Tian, and his eyes shone brightly. You too, Lin Tian Andao. In the next moment, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out. The two of them charged at each other at the same time. Their extreme speed was beyond common sense. It seemed to be countless times faster than light. In the blink of an eye, they collided. Boom! It was just a simple collision, but the fluctuations of laws intertwined, and the aura of destruction spread out. Gusts of turbulent hurricanes swept out, and in an instant, the ground collapsed by dozens of feet. Moreover, the space began to be destroyed at an even more frightening rate. Such momentum made the ordinary gods in the distance tremble. Even the powerful Sky Emperor and an old drunkard were stunned at this moment. This collision was beyond their imagination. Boom! The divine realm of 10 directions shook violently. Waves of destructive light emerged from all directions. Lin Tian used his strongest power, and the ancestral god used his strongest laws. The two peak existences collided with each other with their strongest power. The destructive light kept spreading, sweeping to every corner of the divine realm of 10 directions, and the mountains and rivers lost their color. Moreover, the destructive light gradually spread to the gate of heaven and earth that connected to the 9th dimension. It poured in through the gate of heaven and earth, and spread through the tunnel of heaven and earth. Soon, it intertwined with the 9th dimension. For a moment, the 9th dimension, which was far less sturdy than the divine realm of 10 directions, became even more dilapidated. The destructive light fell on every region, causing the surviving creatures in the 9th dimension to be plunged into disaster. This is heaven and earth going to collapse? What's happening? The 10 directions divine domain was sturdy enough to withstand the peak collision between Lin Tian and the 10 ancestral gods. Although the space was constantly crumbling, the light of destruction was quickly absorbed and filtered out. However, the 9-dimensional world couldn't do this. It couldn't absorb and filter the light of destruction of this level, so the light of destruction was like a never-ending wave that spread to every region, destroying everything in its path. For a moment, shrill and terrified screams rang out from every corner of the 9th dimension. As the destructive light in the divine realm of 10 directions spread to the 9th dimension, one creature after another suffered and died tragically under the destructive light. Moreover, The destructive light even collapsed the barrier of the ninth dimension on its own and seeped into the eighth dimension, causing the countless creatures in the eighth dimension to suffer a great disaster. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of thousands of creatures died tragically. Lin Tian fought with the ancestral god of 10 directions in the divine realm of 10 directions. However, with his current strength, he could already sense the changes in the ninth dimension and the eighth dimension through the gate of heaven and earth. Immediately, his eyes narrowed. After a pause, he threw out the divine origin weapon, the transmigration sword, and the transmigration diagram. They turned into 2 beams of light and entered the gate of heaven and earth that connected to the ninth dimension. When they arrived in the ninth dimension, the transmigration sword met the destructive light in the ninth dimension, and the transmigration diagram entered the eighth dimension to meet the destructive light. While fighting with me, you drew out the divine map of King's domain and the divine origin sword to protect the ants below? The ancestral god of 10 directions' eyes were cold. Human, are you looking down on me? You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.